fly ball into the corner and right. Carries back, and it's gone! It's a home run for Carpenter! It's an amazing performance from the Cardinal first baseman. This has to be one of the greatest individual performances ever by a Cardinal ever. A historic day here at the ballpark for Carpenter.
16 total bases.
Officially announce my retirement from the game of baseball. Was very fortunate enough to play, for some great organizations, and had quite a thrill being able to don the St. Louis Cardinals logo for many years.
That was Matt Carpenter earlier today on a podcast saying he is officially retiring from Major League Baseball. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex out today. He'll be back in with us tomorrow. T-Bone, to me, Matt Carpenter is very clearly the best homegrown position player of the last 15 years. Now, some of that is by default. The reality is the Cardinals just haven't really groomed a homegrown position player star over the last 15 years or so. But it's also because, dude, Matt Carpenter was a stud. I think he was always underrated by this fan base for what he was able to do with the bat. I mean, you think about it. His evolution as a player also was right around the same time as the evolution of baseball was taking place. Like, he went from a guy that as a second-year player in Major League Baseball was a .318 hitter. That existed. That was like 12 years ago. He hit .318 for the entire season and did not lead Major League Baseball in batting average that year, which feels impossible. But
that existed.
That happened. He also hit 55 doubles that season. And then, T-Bone, a few years later, he was a 36 home run hitter for the Cardinals. Now, a lot of people point to that as ultimately what ended his career as a regular hitter for the Cardinals because he sold out for power. I would say he was 32 years old. And that's probably what led to the diminishing returns down the road as he just got old. He got up there in age, and the age curve is what it is. We've seen it with Nolan Arenado. He hit right around that same point in his career, and he used to sell out for power. Now that power just isn't there the same way. But, T-Bone, I wanted to start today's show with Matt Carpenter to show an appreciation for what he was as a Cardinal. This guy is very clearly going to go down as a Cardinals Hall of Famer, an all-time great within this organization, an all-time great dude as well away from the field. I'm really curious to see what he decides to do next. I don't know what he has in his future, but I would imagine there's probably going to be something baseball-related that is a part of it. Kudos to him on what was a hell of a career. 12 years here in St. Louis. Ended up hitting 160 home runs in a Cardinals uniform, 600 RBIs, and most notably, in my opinion, 300 doubles as a Cardinal. One hell of a career.
Yeah, one hell of a career, and especially for a guy that was drafted in the 13th round of the Major League Draft in 2009. Incredible. I agree with you. I think he is no doubt a Cardinals Hall of Famer. I mean, you mentioned some of his best years. In his first real full season of 157 games, second full season, I guess, the 55 double mark. He ended up with 44 doubles in 2015. You mentioned the power that he had. He had to adjust, too, by the way, to the shift. The shift was another thing.
Good point.
That was part of the reason that he did go for that power as well. It was like, dude, I can't hit it past three infielders. So what I'll hit it over their head. He was an incredible baseball player. And by the way, very much not a Rafael Devers. He was very much a team player, would move around positions, played first, played third, played second, was a DH when he came back in the final run at bat last year with the St. Louis Cardinals.
Also was a leader on that team.
100%.
Developed into one of the leaders on the club.
I think he will be a first ballot Cardinals Hall of Famer. It was an incredible career for him and really kind of became the face of the franchise for the Cardinals after Albert Pujols left, which is another incredible thing considering you had Matt Holliday on those teams. It was the two Matts that were leading the charge.
I would add that's why he was underrated by Cardinals fans. The fact that he had to take over following the Albert, Scott Rowland, Jim Edmonds era, the fact that him and Holliday, I think Holliday fits into the same criteria where he was a really good player that was at times miscast, or I would say miscast, is probably the best way to describe it, as like the next Albert, right? The guy that leads your team in every category. And the truth is there just isn't another Albert. I think we've come to that reality at this point. Like, Paul Goldschmidt wasn't Albert. He won an MVP, but he wasn't Albert. Nolan Arenado, not Albert, right? Nobody else is going to be able to recreate what we saw here in St. Louis for a decade with a guy that is arguably the best right-handed hitter of this generation, right? He's up there in that category. So you look at it, and I do think that was at times held against Matt Carpenter, that like, hey, yeah, you're really good. You're not that. You're not that guy. He's 13th in Cardinals history, though, in doubles. It's a hell of a place to be if you're him. He has a heck of a legacy. He's going to go down as a Cardinals Hall of Famer. And T-Bone, this gets us to a conversation that I wanted to have today, which is like in the offseason, Bill DeWitt Jr., John Mozeliak, Chaim Bloom, they all set their agenda of what is next for Cardinals baseball, what the plan is moving forward. And I want to revisit a quote from Bill DeWitt Jr. on the Cardinals returning to their roots. Take a listen.
The best way to build a championship club, in my view, is to have good young players coming through the system. And when you go a period of time where you don't have the luxury of early draft choices, it's very difficult. You can't just spend your way into it. I've always been a draft and develop guy, and I think that's the best way to build a baseball team.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. YouTube chat is available for you at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. Matt Carpenter, pretty clearly, at least in my mind, the best Cardinals position player developed over the last 15 years. Homegrown, drafted, developed, or signed via international free agency, drafted and developed here within the organization. Who would you put second on that list? I've got some options for you. The guys that I came up with, Tommy Edman, Colton Wong, Brendan Donovan. You could throw Lars Nootbaar maybe into this conversation. Alan Craig, the peak was really good, but it was short-lived. Paul DeJong had a few pretty good seasons. Tommy Pham had a great season and a few other pretty good ones here in St. Louis. Who would you guys put second on the list of the best Cardinals homegrown position players of the last 15 years?
I think I would go with Brendan Donovan. Because when I look at Brendan Donovan, you've got the versatility, which was another thing that was a plus for Tommy Edman. And that was really a big part that really carries Tommy Edman's WAR. Was he was great defensively, won a Gold Glove, was a guy that could play multiple positions for you, which was helpful. But when you take a look at what Tommy Edman was offensively here in St. Louis, he wasn't what he is today with the Dodgers, which is like Babe Ruth. But
slightly above league average.
He was slightly above league average. He had a couple of years where he was below league average. Like you look at his year in 2021, he was 9% below league average for the Cardinals. His last year here in 2023, 9% below league average. He was a good offensive player. He wasn't a great offensive player. The reason I throw Donovan in this category for me is he's got the same versatility as Tommy Edman. He can play in the outfield. He can play second base. We've seen him at third. We've seen him at short when they got in a pinch this year. Plays every position well, has a Gold Glove, and has been above league average in every season of his career so far. So I think my answer to this question would be the guy that's hitting third for the Cardinals today in their batting order, which is Brendan Donovan. I think he's the best homegrown talent that they have had since Matt Carpenter.
Yeah, if Donovan hasn't already overtaken Edman, he's poised to do so. We see the duration of the season, how it plays out. He's right there. Tanner, I know you're with me in this regard, too. One of the great what-if stories or prospects, developmental pieces in an Alan Craig. But, BK, really, I think the overriding story or point here is that such a vast divide. There's such a huge chasm between Matt Carpenter and everybody else on this list, and that is my biggest takeaway and hammers home just how criminally underrated in the post-Pujols and Holiday era he actually turned out to be. I don't think that we get a full appreciation for the body of work until years down the line in retrospect.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. Somebody says Yachty. Yeah, Yachty was not drafted or developed in the last 15 years. He came up 20 years ago. So he would not fit into the criteria that we're talking about. I'm talking made their debut 2010 or later, was drafted and developed within the organization. Yachty doesn't qualify. Obviously, Albert Pujols would not qualify for this. Other great players for the Cardinals that came from other organizations, such as Matt Holliday, Paul Goldschmidt. You could throw Nolan Arenado into that criteria. They would not qualify. Somebody mentioned, they brought up the idea of, hey, what about Randall Grichuk? He was also drafted and developed within another organization. David Freese, another organization. A lot of the guys that are remembered fondly, and we've talked about this in the past, came from elsewhere. I would put Brendan Donovan into this criteria. I think he would probably be second for me, if not now, certainly by the end of this season or next. Colton Wong, I think, is criminally underrated at times. He was a hell of a baseball player here in St. Louis, man. And if you're looking for just peak years, Tommy Pham would fit into this. I would say Alan Craig fits into this as well in that regard, but it was so brief that I don't know that they would rise to the level of some of the guys that we've been talking about that could be second. But you mentioned one of your takeaways from this, Bradford. My takeaway is, man, for all of the talk about the Cardinals developing this next star talent and like we got to return to our roots, dude, your roots are to trade for that player.
Yeah.
The roots are to go acquire that player from elsewhere. And so while we're maintaining, like, Walker needs to be a star, Ivan Herrera, could he be a star? The truth is the Cardinals' secret sauce has been developing really good players. A lot of them. There are a lot of players that we could choose from that are in this, like Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar, Colton Wong, Harrison Bader, Tommy Edman. That range of outcomes where you're just a really solid all-around player. 10 to 15, 20 of those guys that we could choose from. What they struggle with is developing a superstar, which is the case for most teams across Major League Baseball. It's really hard to do, especially when you're drafting as low as they have been over the last 15 years.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about when Bill DeWitt made those comments at Winter Warm-Up of, hey, we've got to develop the next wave of Cardinals baseball. Sure, Cardinals have been good at developing a lot of complementary pieces. Like, you look at their top 10 guys in WAR since the 2006 season, so this still does include Albert and Yachty, guys that they did develop as kind of stars. But a lot of the pieces that they developed that are in the top 10 were complementary pieces. Bader, 10th in WAR at that time. Wong, who we talked about, 8th in WAR in that time frame. Edman, 7th. Most of the guys that were viewed as stars came from externally. Matt Holliday, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, even Ryan Ludwig. I don't know if he was viewed as a star, but it was very good.
He had an excellent season.
Yeah, he was a guy that was brought from outside of the organization. Their roots have not been in hey, we're going to draft and we're going to develop star players. You know who can say that? The Washington Nationals, who drafted and developed a Bryce Harper, a Juan Soto. Potentially James Wood is the next version of an outfielder that they're going to do that with. That's not been in the Cardinals' realm with position players. They are very good at acquiring or at developing these complementary pieces. I still think Donovan, though he's having an incredible season, is viewed more of that. I don't think he is a star. You know, I think the same can be said for a Lars Nootbaar. He's more of a complimentary piece than he is a star. I think he gets more star status because of this WBC status with Japan, but those are complementary pieces. Their formula, and I still think this is their formula to success, is going out there and acquiring the star players, getting them here, seeing if you can convince them to stay in St. Louis. That, to me, is still their formula.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up on this? And this comes from the 314 on the text line. Guys, it would have been a Randy Arozarena, but we traded him. Do you think Randy Arozarena would have been the second best position player drafted and developed or acquired and developed within the Cardinal system had they not traded him? So I think the answer to that might be yes. I actually think that's probably correct. If we're talking about Donovan or Edman as being the like clear second tier for the Cardinals, I think Arozarena would be considered to be better than those two guys, right?
Yeah, probably. Because, I mean, he's been about 20% above league average every season, but like last
Steals
year.
25 bags a year.
Hits for power. He's also a guy
that's probably the answer.
He's also a guy that, and this is one of the big knocks against some of the guys recently, would have had big moments in October. He's clearly a clutch performer, and that was one thing that is a knock against Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. So, yeah, I probably would agree with the text line. The second
Somebody
best
else
guy is
brought
what
up
to get rid
Adolis
of.
Garcia. Where would he rank on this list? I don't have him as high.
Come on.
Adolis Garcia would not be as high on that list. He was kind of similar, honestly, to Tommy Pham. Had a really great season, but otherwise has been like slightly above league average offensively, and most of the time, honestly, below average offensively. So I think that is more like, I would put Adolis Garcia in the Tommy Pham, Alan Craig category of very short sample size of a really high peak.
Yeah,
I do not think that he fits that same criteria.
I would agree with that. I think he would be slightly ahead of like a Matt Adams, but yeah, I think he's probably in that range.
I'm not actually sure that I would have him above Matt Adams, to be honest with you.
I think
basically one great season by him.
Yeah, but I mean, he's had a WAR of, and look, I don't even like WAR that much, but he's had 3 years of a WAR above 3.5. And Adams, I think, only had 1 year at 2+ here in St. Louis. So I think I would give a slight edge to Adolis Garcia. But yeah, I agree. I don't think he would be up there with Randy Arozarena by any means.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk a little bit more about this throughout the day today. We're getting a bunch of other texts in. So a lot of people saying would have been Oscar Taveras. Possible. We just don't know. It's impossible to be able to say. And then a bunch of pitchers are being being texted in. One of the things that I did want to have as a criteria on this is position players, because there's a lot of pitchers that you could throw into the mix over the last 15 years. The position player side of things is where they have really struggled to produce that legitimate superstar. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, there's big news in Missouri recruiting over the last 24 hours or so. The top player in the state, one of the top players in the country, decided where he's going to go play in college, and it has caused quite the stir when it comes to the recruiting ranks. We'll talk about that, what it means big picture-wise in 15 minutes. But next, the Cardinals offense is about to be put to a significant test over the next week. Are they going to be able to pass this one? We'll talk about it next here on BK and Ferrario.
We want to hear from you. Text us at 314-399-9646 on the Air Comfort Service Heating, Cooling, and Insulation text line on 101 ESPN. They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Driven toward the gap right center. Nobody's getting that ball. It is a line drive home run. Herrera with a rocket shot to right center, and the Cardinals are back in front.
That's what it sounded like on FanDuel Sports Midwest over the weekend as Ivan Herrera made his return to the lineup and made his presence felt. Cardinals end up winning that game. They get some power from their right-handed catcher/DH. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. T-Bone, you look at the schedule, whether it starts today with Luzardo and Nola. Those are the two starters that the Cardinals are going up against. It continues this weekend, the good arms that they are going to see. Cole Reagans is the #1 starting pitcher for the Kansas City Royals. Seth Lugo was top 5 in Cy Young consideration last year. He'll be going on Saturday against the Cardinals. And then Michael Wacha, who has quietly put together one hell of a major league career. He's been like a sub-4 ERA for each of the past 5 seasons, I think. He's going to start on Sunday. Then you continue. You go to Detroit comes here. You got Skubal and Flaherty that you'll see in that series. Gallen and Kelly are scheduled to start for Arizona at the beginning of that series starting the following weekend. T-Bone, we're about to see this Cardinals offense, which has been roughly top 10 in most statistical categories on the season. They're about to be put to the test once again. We saw them early on. They lived up to it against Paul Skeens, Zach Wheeler, Pablo Lopez. They allowed 11 runs in 17 innings against the Cardinals. One of the biggest questions that I think a lot of Cardinals fans have had about the offense in recent seasons is, okay, sure, you can put up 10 runs against the lowly starter that you go up against for the Pittsburgh Pirates, but what happens when you go up against the quality pitching across Major League Baseball? Can the offense adjust to that? A lot of the time, the answer has been no, especially right-handed starters. That has been a huge issue for them in recent seasons. Well, you're about to get quite the dose of right-handed stud starters over the course of the next week. I'm fascinated to see what they look like against them.
Yeah, I'll be really curious because we talked about, the win on, what was that, Monday, I guess it was, against the Phillies. That was like the best win of the season for the Cardinals. I felt that way because it was a playoff-style game. When you get to the playoffs, these are all the arms you're going to see if you get to the playoffs. These are the kind of arms you're going to see and you're going to have to beat. Luzardo, who a lot of people probably didn't view as like one of the best arms in baseball, he's been incredible with the Philadelphia Phillies. He's gotten back to his form when he was with the Marlins. Aaron Nola, big game pitcher. Reagans, Lugo, Wacha, Skubal, Flaherty, Gallen, Kelly. Those are all playoff-style pitchers. You're not going to be able to win these games by going the singles route. You're going to have to slug. And to the Cardinals' credit, they are 10th in slugging percentage coming into today. They are a team that is slug, baby, slug. They do it a little bit different style. They're more doubles than they are home run oriented.
They are 10th in slugging percentage. They are 19th in home runs on the season with 31. But that's not a bad thing.
No.
Hitting a bunch of doubles is a good thing. That is a quality way to win. You are going to need that home run number to boost, though, by the end of the season.
Yeah, you're going to need, especially because that is when you put up big innings against these guys, right? When you see a pitcher like a Luzardo, or really in that Royal Series, Reagans, Lugo, and Wacha, the best way that you're going to be able to put up a crooked number against those guys is by hitting the home run ball. So it will be interesting to see how this lineup looks. Look, I think they have shown that they will be fine when they go up against these style of pitchers. I mean, you look at really the only series that I would say they've been shut down was that Mets series. And then you look at, they've seen Skeens a couple of times and they've beaten Skeens a couple of times this season. So I think this is the one area where if you're a Cardinals fan, maybe you're looking at them and saying, I just don't know if I buy this offense, because there isn't yet a star on this roster, I would say, with this offense. These are the kind of series where you can look and say, okay, maybe this idea of kind of death by 1,000 cuts where we're going to run basically 7 guys deep in our lineup, see if this really implements itself in these upcoming series.
Yeah, and I don't have a ton of questions about it. I think they're a top half of the league offense. I think they're a borderline top 10 offense, but now you get to see what the ceiling is. Because these are the teams, these are the pitchers that you're going to need to beat if you are going to be a legitimate contender this year in Major League Baseball. We'll see. It's still far way away from that. A big piece of that offense, or at least what we expected to be a big piece of the offense, especially when it comes to that slugging percentage and the home runs that we just talked about, Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker. Ollie Marmol was asked yesterday. He joined the Gas House Gang, which he does each and every Tuesday, and he was on with them, and he was asked about the struggles that we have seen from those two young players this season. I thought he gave a really honest assessment, T-Bone, something that I think Cardinals fans will be interested in hearing why they still believe that it's going to come around for those two players. Here's what Ollie Marmol had to say. This is via KMOX on the Gas House Gang.
I will say I am committed to both of them for the reason that, they're having a tough time. There aren't a ton of things pointing in a direction, if I'm just being completely honest, and I've had this conversation with both of them where it says hey, this is pointing in the right direction, just keep doing it. the game starts, and it's been hard for Jordan to carry the work that has happened in the cage into the game. But if you had the luxury of watching his work with Brownie underneath and BA and Packy, man, you would be encouraged that, man, this is going to carry over because the work has been good. It transferring to the game under pressure in real time just hasn't happened yet. So we're committed to continuing to see that through. With Gorman, it's different, man. Like, I know there's some stuff written on, well, the bat speed's down. Well, if you're trying to make contact, it's going to come at the expense of something. Bat speed isn't the end all be all, right? There's guys with crazy amounts of bat speed that can't hit. So yes, he is sacrificing some of that for contact. And is it showing in the game just yet? No. But we have to stay committed. And I'll say it again, Brandon, we talked about this, like at the end of 2025, we have to know what we have with these guys. So we don't have to talk about what that runway looks like. We are head down just trying to get them to transfer it today. And then we wake up tomorrow and we're going to do it all over again. But I will say that both of them do feel supported in this process, and Brownie's continuing to do a really nice job with them. But we have to stay committed to it.
I like hearing the honesty at the beginning of that, where he said, listen, we understand. It's not really showing up in the field. Like, if you just look at the back of the baseball card, there's nothing to be excited about. You go even further under the hood. You look at some of the nerdy numbers, the average exit velocity, barrel rates, the chase rates, all of these different things. It's all bad. There's almost nothing you can point to and be like, well, that's the thing that you can eventually start to bet on. Like, if Jordan Walker was hitting the ball extremely hard, he was putting it in play with regularity, he wasn't chasing, you were seeing, I thought he felt this way at the beginning of the season, honestly, you were seeing the at-bats and they looked like they were more professional, and they looked like he was starting to figure things out at the plate. But the results weren't there just yet. All right, well, I can point to those things and be like, eventually this is going to straighten out, the batted ball luck's going to go his way, and you're going to see a better version of Jordan Walker. The results will follow what the process has been. It hasn't been the case. The process still looks bad at the plate for Jordan Walker right now. And all they can cling to is what's happening behind the scenes, and this is why I have said all along, T-Bone, over the past couple of weeks we've been talking about Walker and his playing time, I don't know what they know. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, whether that's in Jordan Walker's own head or the work that they are putting in behind the scenes that we don't get to see on a day-to-day basis. If that stuff is still making them believe this is going to get better, cool. I'm good with having him in the lineup every single day because that was always the goal for 2025. Gorman feels like a separate category. It was a separate category on opening day. They made their thoughts known with their actions, set aside their words. So I want to focus on Walker here. He's really the one that we need to hone in on. If they start to lose that faith, if they suddenly start to believe, hey, Walker's not going to get this figured out, mentally he is swimming in all of the stuff that we're throwing at him, that is when you have to change some things. But right now, it sure sounds like the coaches still have his back. It sounds like they are optimistic about where this is headed. That doesn't mean it's going to work. But until that changes, I continue to play him every single day.
Yeah, I agree that with hey, they have his back. They clearly are supporting Jordan Walker, and it is clear by the fact that, hey, they're throwing him out there every day, even though there are the struggles. We've even seen Ali Marmol, and I think this is crucial as well, because Jordan's the one guy that I've noticed it the most, and maybe it's because I'm honing in on his at-bats a lot, where the zone gets expanded on him, where he's getting calls that go against his way, and I see Ali Marmol being the one barking at the umpire trying to support his player. The thing that I just have a tough time with, and I'm not even saying that it is wrong of what is being said, how much of this is just coach speak, right? The guy's on the roster. I have to defend the guy. I mean, that is the role of the manager, is to defend the player, and saying, because this is a lot of the same stuff we were hearing with Fernandez, right? And I understand it's different, but it was, hey, we think it's best for him to be up here. We think we can work with him. We think we can fix the slider. And it didn't happen. They kept saying that, and we even got the quote from Ali, which was, well, if a position player goes 0 for 4, we don't talk about that, but if a bullpen arm has a bad day, we talk about it. And Fernandez got sent down to the minor leagues because they figured they couldn't fix him, and they had to make the move. I just don't know how much of this is, okay, yes, this is what is really going on behind the scenes. They truly are believing in the process. And how much of this is actually just, hey, this is what the coach is supposed to say. Because I find it interesting that Ali is saying in the very beginning of that cut says, you know, there's just not a lot to look at and say, hey, well, this is what we can hang our hat on. Because at some point, it does become about the results. And I always go back to when Matt Carpenter was going through it with Mike Schilt. I think it was 2019, if I remember correctly. And it was, boy, there's just not results for Matt Carpenter. But you could look at the stuff and say he is hitting the ball hard.
And that was true. At the time, you could say that.
You don't have any of that for Jordan Walker, and that's what makes me wonder how much of this is just coaches speak versus, yeah, he actually is putting in the work behind the scenes. That is the tough part to try and separate since we're not behind those closed doors.
Talking to people around the club, I think this is real. I don't know. Maybe they're just selling a bunch of BS. Maybe. Like that. It wouldn't be the first time that has happened. But there have been murmurs, T-Bone, you've heard them, in the past where it's like, hey, man, Jordan Walker is a little bit stubborn with the way that he goes about things. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing. Jordan Walker got to the big leagues in a certain way, and it worked for him. He was pushed to the big leagues quicker than probably he should have been because of the success that he had doing things his way. So it would make all the sense in the world if he was a little bit stubborn. Honestly, it would have been surprising if he wasn't.
Yeah.
So I think there were times in the past where that was a little frustrating for coaches around the team. The fact that you're hearing the opposite right now, that it does sound as though he is open to things and he is willing to try to make the necessary changes, I think that's noteworthy. Because to me, that is a change from the way that they have talked about Jordan Walker privately and publicly over the past couple of seasons. I don't know if it'll work. I have no idea if Jordan Walker will eventually become a good player. But, and we're going to talk about this more next week when the Cardinals play against the Detroit Tigers, Spencer Torkelson was a terrible baseball player last year. Terrible. He is 25 years old, and in his first big league season, he hit for a bunch of power. Didn't do a whole lot else, but hit for power. He was a top prospect similar to Jordan Walker, and people in Detroit were ready to give up on him as well. This is his fourth year at the big league level. Well, this season, what has he done? Well, he's had 11 home runs and 11 doubles in their first 43 games, and he's a big part of the reason why the Detroit Tigers are back to being in contention in the AL. Not just the Central. Like, the Tigers are a contender with a capital C. Walker still has some runway to become that. There's still time before Walker gets to where Torkelson currently is, so it could work out. I'm just telling you, I'm not losing faith right now completely until I hear them start to lose faith on that side of things. He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, we'll get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show and get your questions in. But next, can we just stop this charade? We all know what recruiting is at the high school level, and it's okay. We don't have to pretend it's something else. I'll talk to you about the latest story that took place with that next year on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is powered by Kaufman Townsley St. Louis's injury lawyers. Call 314-500-5000.
My house has a new glow. I love my windows. Universal Windows Direct.
Hey, this is Tim McKernan. Right now, get 50% off your windows, plus no interest and no payments for 12 months and free entry door with your windows. Schedule your free in-home estimate today.
I love my windows. They've got that brand new home effect. Universal Windows Direct.
playoffs are on ESPN. Tonight, Celtics and Knicks. Pregame at 5:30, tip-off at 6. Your home for the NBA is 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Fetty and friends give it another go in Philly. Good morning. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals and Phillies were washed out yesterday, so a split doubleheader is on the immediate horizon. This afternoon's opener unfolds at 12:05 as Eric Fetty duels Jesus Luzardo. Tonight, Sonny Gray clashes against Aaron Nola. St. Louis, of course, riding that 9-game winning streak. NHL, Mikko Rantanen Stars find themselves a one victory away from Western Conference final status after besting Winnipeg 3-1. Florida, Toronto, plus Edmonton, Vegas action occurring later. NBA-wise, 101 ESPN will feature New York, Boston post-Fastlane. Celtics star Jason Tatum just underwent surgery to repair his ruptured Achilles tendon. The SportsCenter update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Well, I think my response to it is it's not the same narrative people like Pete Nakos are pushing right now. I mean, I think there's just a false narrative that's why I'm choosing. And I think that, I think relationships won out with Miami. That was kind of what did it for me. I mean, they spent the most time with me. They put the most effort into recruiting me. I mean, I've got a lot of skin in the game with all of these schools as far as like getting represented by Drew and making sure that I'm going to be fairly compensated. And I think every school's done a good job with that and being accommodating with that. And I think that anyone who'd say otherwise about how I've done my recruitment has been just misled.
All right, so that was Jackson Cantwell yesterday after he decided to commit to the University of Miami. For those not familiar, Jackson Cantwell is one of the top players in the country. He is here from this state of Missouri. Previously, he was considered to be a lean for either Mizzou or Georgia. And then Miami entered the picture. And listen, they were always a team that was recruiting him, don't get me wrong, but he ended up with Drew, the guy that he mentioned there, Drew Rosenhaus. That's his agent. These guys, a lot of the top prospects now have agents that are representing them, and that's how these deals get done. It's a lot like free agency in the NFL. It's not just, hey, I'm going on these recruiting trips and finding out about the family atmospheres or anything like that. No, it's about, okay, what does the contract look like? What does the money look like? And if it's up to a certain level, yeah, I'll show some more interest in your program. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the game, man. If you currently have a job and you're happily employed in that job, and another company comes to you and says, hey, would you be interested in making the jump to our company? One of the first questions that is asked there is, well, sure, but for what? Like, I'm interested in the company. Of course, I'm always interested in what the opportunities are out there, but it's going to require a good job and, let's be honest, a bump in pay for you to make that move. So Jackson Cantwell, according to some of the reports out there, got a deal worth about $2.5 million a year. That's a hell of a lot of money for an 18-year-old that has shown zero at the collegiate level. Again, that's reporting out there. Who knows, right? But according to the same report, that is about double what Georgia offered to him via NIL money. So Miami came in with a bag, and they get the player. Well, the Cantwell side of things is pushed back against what they call the narrative and what they consider to be like, I guess it's seen as a negative that he chose the money at Miami. Tanner, I celebrate the kid. Dude, if you got a bag from the University of Miami and you get to go play for a program that was right up there among the best in college football last year with Cam Ward as the quarterback and nearly made it to the college football playoff. And if the playoff had expanded, which it very well may by the time that Cantwell is done in college, probably would have made it to the college football playoff. And you get to live in the city of Miami for the next 3 to 4 years. And you get paid a couple $1 million a year to do so. So you're a rich 18-year-old living in Miami for the next 3 or 4 years. Dude, kudos to you. That sounds like the dream. You had it made. I don't think you need to push back against this narrative. You should say, hell yeah, we found a way, me and my agent, to get me $10 million from the University of Miami to play college football for the next 4 years. God bless you. That's what the system's there for.
Yeah, I don't understand why he cares if that is the narrative or what the pushback there is. dude, you got the most money from Miami. Good for you, man. You're 18 years old. To your point, you get to go play for a Power 4 in a Power 4 conference for a team that was right there and will be viewed as every year, I would think, as a potential college football playoff team. Miami U is one of the best football programs in the last 2 decades, I would say. Also, you get to live in freaking Miami. That sounds great as a millionaire. Like, dude, you can say what you want, man. You got a bag. Like, you should celebrate that. I would go around saying, yeah, Miami, you gave me the bag. If anybody wants to try and top it, we know how these commitments work. You can come back in with another offer if you want. Good for Jackson Cantwell. I don't understand why he needs to say, like, it wasn't about the money. Dude,
it's crazy.
This is what recruiting is about now. Recruiting, it was always really about this, was, hey, who kind of gave me the money in the, as Tennessee would do, the McDonald's bag? It's okay to say this is what it is. There is no going back from where we are right now in college athletics. It's okay to say, hey, I just decided to go where the most money was. I think that's totally fine.
It's why I always got confused by Mizzou fans that pushed back on this notion that Luther Burden chose Mizzou because of the money. Guys, he did. Like, he did. That's okay. He also was interested, clearly, in playing at Mizzou because he didn't just go to Mizzou. He stayed at Mizzou the entire time that he was in college.
That's the key.
Incredibly rare. But why did he end up at Mizzou? There was a large part of why he ended up at Mizzou that was the NIL money that was available to him at Mizzou. So, like, good on them. Good on Luther Burden. Good on Mizzou for finding a way to incentivize a kid that otherwise might not have ended up at Mizzou. I bet you 15 years ago, Luther Burden plays at Oklahoma or Georgia. That's probably where he ends up. But in the modern game, things were, the playing field was leveled, and Mizzou was able and willing, most importantly, to offer him more money than other teams were. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're Miami and you think this guy is going to be one of the best offensive linemen in the country over the next 4 years, well, then offer him whatever he's worth. And that's what they clearly decided to do here. Georgia didn't. Georgia saw him differently. Otherwise, they would have offered more money to him. So, again, this is like in free agency, there are certain teams that decide, like this offseason, somebody's going to get Sam Bennett. I don't know who that team's going to be. They're probably going to offer an extra year and a couple $1,000,000 extra over the course of the entire contract. That's how it works. How did the Cardinals get Dexter Fowler? They added an extra year on the deal. So if you want these players now, that's what's going to have to happen. And if you're a fan of a team, you shouldn't like look down on them for getting them because of the money. That's how this works now.
None of this is a coincidence. None of this is shocking. You totally get it from the perspective of Cantwell. And I also get why he would feel the need or why he would want guys to go out there and basically shape or mold the narrative. Because let's just be completely frank about this. Even though Oregon was reported to have been in on him, even though the likes of Ohio State also reported to be in on him, we know at the end of the day, these schools basically it's just paying lip service to what may have been the one prohibitive threat to Miami. Yes, he swooped in at the 11th hour. We understand that. Was definitely, of course, when you're talking about that offer maybe coming from Georgia. And what may rub some people the wrong way, the fact that just last weekend, where was he? He was in Athens. But who cares? Miami had every right.
Recruiting.
Yeah, Cantwell, I know, had every right to be able to do so. You just knew that it seems like a natural partnership. And Tanner, you mentioned the body of work, the success over the past couple of decades. You're living in Miami. You're playing now for a program that has been extremely stout over the last few seasons. No, yeah, Carson Beck gives you a major opportunity to compete this year as well. He does. He's going to bounce back.
We'll
crystal ball.
that one I'm not so sure about. But hey, playing in Miami, playing for a good program, I'm not going to diminish any of that. But
I'll
the
tie
whole
on that sword.
Carson Beck thing, we'll see. We'll see how that ends up going for them.
All right, I know who won't be picking Miami on the ACC.
We'll see
back
on
to
that
it.
one. I just like I don't have any issue with any of this. And to your point, I'm like, yeah, he was in Georgia last weekend. Cool. The kid wanted to take a trip to Athens, Georgia. Sounds great to me.
Yeah, you know where he doesn't?
Last time that you get the opportunity to live like a king in Athens before you end up living like a king in Miami.
You know what I don't have to tell you about, like what it's like to be at a place, is Miami. You know what I would need to learn a lot about? Athens, Georgia, because it doesn't have the same.
Athens is cool.
Athens is cool, sure, but I know what Miami is without ever going to Miami. I would have to go to Athens. By the way, I've been to Columbus in the winter. It's freaking cold there. So Ohio State, sorry, I'm out. I'd rather be in Miami.
All right, this one comes from John Gruden's burner. Guys, the reason that people are talking about this is because he's claiming it's not about the money when obviously that's what it's about. I agree. I think he shouldn't have done that. I think it's crazy the way that him and his representation are handling this. You hire Drew Rosenhaus. Drew Rosenhaus has one job. One. It is to get you as much money as humanly possible. He's a really good agent at that. His job is to extract as much financial value out of your employer as he possibly can. He's really freaking good at it. That's why he is known as well as he is around the NFL community. So, yes, I agree. That's why this is a story. And I think they're handling this incorrectly. I think he should have said, listen, was money a part of my decision? Of course it was. Every team that I talked to was willing to give me a lot of money. Miami, I think, is the best program for me. And they were willing to give me the most amount of money. Both of those things came true, which makes this my dream scenario. I'm getting paid as much as I could have, and I'm playing for the program that I wanted to play for. Boom, end of story. You're good. Life's good, man. Like, Luther Burden didn't shy away from the fact that he got a bunch of NIL money. I do think part of what's making this different is that NIL is not what it was intended to be. NIL right now is just pay for play. Let's just call it what it is. It's the colleges having this money in a slush fund, effectively, that is going out and being disseminated to your players. What it was intended to be is honestly what Burden did, where he has like an old Vienna contract and he's doing stuff with Schnucks and like the local sub shop has a Luther Burden commercial, like those kinds of things, right? That's what originally, it was like the Olympic model. And it has changed, and it has gone to the school pays you to like tweet out stuff about going to volleyball games and like the True Tiger Fund and all of these different things. So there's not actually anything that is a partnership between the player and local companies or anything like that. That's where this has gone a little bit awry, but that's a different conversation for a different day. Coming up in 15 minutes, Major League Baseball had a decision yesterday that made Tanner big mad. We'll get into that in 15 minutes. Questions and answers is next here on 101 ESPN.
You can now listen to 101 ESPN on demand. Get caught up on all our shows and podcasts at 101ESPN.com or on the 101 mobile app. 101 ESPN podcasts are presented by the Schaefer Door Company. back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions in, go ahead and get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line. From the 636, guys, how do you view Dennis Gates 3 years into his tenure at Mizzou? And how do you think he is viewed inside of the Mizzou athletic department with an AD in place that wasn't involved when he was hired? I think they like him. I think he's done a pretty good job. I think the thing for Dennis Gates that is tough to overcome is that 0 season in conference play. There will be some fans that just never overlook that until he wins a title at Mizzou, which probably isn't going to happen if we're just being honest.
Yeah.
So I think Dennis Gates overall has done a good job. I think the 0 is inexcusable. It's hard to say otherwise, but I think he's done a good job.
Yeah, I would say he's done a good job. I agree with your first one on, I think the athletics department likes him. Why? He got them into the NCAA tournament last year. I think he's done a good job, and I think part of that 0 year can be somewhat explained. They dealt with injuries. It's clear they had some talent, like their three-point shooter. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? Grill missed most of that year, right? And we just saw what Caleb Grill could do for a program this year when he was healthy. So
Tanjay left.
Yeah, and he was a stud in the Big Ten last year.
Clearly, they have an eye for talent in the portal.
Yeah.
They've done a good job.
I think you got to be happy with where he's at. I think that 0 year, yes, agree. 0 is unacceptable, but it's clear why they got to that spot. There's just too many injuries for them to overcome.
He's the consummate ambassador for your program. Now, that 0 season did give me a little bit of trepidation heading into last year. You were able to turn it around, have a more than representative showing, especially in the first half of the conference schedule. So what is the next step? What is the next step in the progression? You have to do something in the postseason.
From the 314 guys, they also just landed, from the 636, they also just landed a 5-star out of Arkansas. It sounds like that is going to be the case. I don't really know how to judge high school recruiting in college basketball anymore. Most of the time, they're not good in year one, and then you just have to secure them not only for that first year, but you're basically going to have to re-recruit them heading into next season. So we're 2 years away from that really mattering. But yes, it's a good get as long as he's there in 2 years. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from Tim's Toothless Bottom Boy. If not Ollie or any ex-Cardinals player, who do you think would be the best option for the Cardinals' next manager? So Ollie is ruled out. Ex-Cardinals are ruled out. Who would be your number one candidate to be the next Cardinals manager? I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to be just full disclosure. I don't know. Some bench coach that probably is great at his job that I've never heard of.
Yeah, that's probably the right answer. Just to throw one out there, and I don't know how realistic it is of happening because there's no reporting around it, is just kind of some tinfoil speculation from me. I wonder if Tampa Bay continues to struggle, if Kevin Cash is like, man, I don't want to go through this whole living in a minor league ballpark experience. We're a low market team.
Interesting.
I want out, and there would be a connection with Chaim Bloom. Chaim Bloom was there and worked with Kevin Cash. So that would be the guy that I would say, he would be my number one target, but I don't know how realistic that really
Basically
is.
the same thing that happened with Joe Madden.
Yeah.
He was also, by the way, in the Cleveland Guardians organization for a little bit of time.
Chaim was?
Kevin Cash was.
Oh.
So he's got some history, I would assume, with some of the people that came over from Cleveland as well. Yeah. He was only there for a little bit of time, so I don't know how much that matters, but that's something else worth at least keeping in the back of your mind as well. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. From the 573 guys, Mark DeRosa would be a name to watch. Former Cardinals, so
he's ruled out.
He wouldn't work. Somebody else said Beltran. Yeah, also former Cardinal. That's the thing. Most of the names that you'll hear connected to the Cardinals, I have to imagine played for the Cardinals because most of the top manager candidates in Major League Baseball next year will be former Cardinals.
Beltran just has a tiny bit of baggage too.
I'd be fine with it. Tanner would not, and that's what we want to get to coming up in the next segment. So Major League Baseball made an announcement yesterday. Tanner was big mad about it. So much so that Tanner doesn't tweet a whole lot. He tweeted about this one. We'll tell you about it next here on 101 ESPN.
WXOS HD1 East St. Louis. 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. The Birmingham Stallions at the Battle Dome at America Center, Saturday, May 17th. Then 1 week later, see the Battle Hawks host the San Antonio Brahmas on Friday night, May 23rd.
It's 2 big home games and time to show the United Football League that CAW is the law.
Get all the ticket info and a chance to win a 4-pack of tickets to both games right now at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
I don't particularly care for Pete Rose. I want to say that on the front end here. I don't like the guy all that much. I find him to be highly problematic in a number of ways. But the conversation that we're about to have, in my opinion, is a baseball conversation. And so let me have that as the preface for anything that we discuss the rest of this segment. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. So The Athletic wrote about this, and it has been reported widely elsewhere. Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred effectively reinstated Pete Rose yesterday, removing him and other deceased players, including Shoeless Joe Jackson, who had permanently been suspended from Major League Baseball. So what does this mean? Well, it means that he is potentially, at least, up for the Hall of Fame again. That is effectively what removing his lifetime ban has done. The Eras Committee works in 3-year rotations, and without directly referring to Pete Rose, the statement said that players would be removed from that permanent ineligibility list, and they would be classified in the classic baseball era, which covers baseball players that made their greatest impact prior to 1980. In other words, Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson, who we can set aside for a minute, will be eligible for induction into the Hall of Fame in the winter of 2027 as a part of the class of 2028. Each of the candidates on that era committee ballot must receive at least 75% of the vote. So he needs at least 12 of the 16 voters to vote him into the Hall of Fame. T-Bone, this has been a long time coming. I have always stated I think Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame, and you do with him what you could do with with our era's version of Babe Ruth, basically, with Barry Bonds. You put on the plaque, hey, this guy bet on baseball. On Barry Bonds' plaque, you put on it, hey, this guy at a time where it wasn't technically against the rules, he did take performance-enhancing drugs, right? I think all of that is necessary because ultimately the Hall of Fame is a museum. It is telling the story of Major League Baseball through the years, good and bad, and trying to do so in order to tell the story of what your sport has been. You can't tell the story of baseball without talking about the fact that people of color were unable to play baseball for decades, right? So if that is a part of the history of baseball, this is also part of it, man. The scandals that exist within your sport, the Houston Astros scandal, that's a part of your sport. The Black Sox scandal, that's a part of your sport. Pete Rose betting on baseball and being mostly a bad dude, that is a part of your sport as well. But he also won an MVP. The guy's the all-time hits leader. He's a multi-time World Series winner and a batting title crown multiple times over. The guy is very clearly a Hall of Fame caliber worthy player. So to me, I think this was a long time coming. I think he should have been in the Hall of Fame well prior to this ruling. But T-Bone, I know you disagree with almost every single word that I just said. So what did yesterday feel like for you as somebody that does not want to see Pete Rose in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame?
I was very disappointed in Rob Manfred, and I mean, that's not shocking. I think he's one of the worst commissioners. I think he is the worst commissioner going right now, but I'm very disappointed. I think Pete Rose should still be inevitably suspended from baseball. I mean, he really raised questions of the integrity of the game in the 80s when he was, and I just want to make this clear, the investigation that proved that he was betting on baseball games was while he was playing as well as managing. This is not just hey, he was managing baseball games and that's when he got caught. You should just look at his playing career. He got caught betting on baseball while he was still playing as he served as a player manager. To me, that is a guy, and I understand that some people, and you just mentioned it, BK, want just, hey, this is the story of baseball. We should put it on a plaque and it just be part of what's in the Hall of Fame. I think the Hall of Fame is an honor for the best guys of the sport and the guys that showed integrity for the sport. And I think guys like Pete Rose didn't do that. I think the guys in the Astros that will be up for the Hall of Fame at someday, like Jose Altuve, probably a Hall of Famer based on his playing career. I think he shouldn't be into the Hall of Fame because of the cheating scandal.
Beltran, same thing.
Beltran is in that same vote. I would not vote for Carlos Beltran for the Hall of Fame, and I know he's probably going to get in. I totally disagree with that. I would not have voted for David Ortiz, by the way, who is in the Hall of Fame, who had his connections to PEDs. I think those guys don't belong in the Hall of Fame, and I want to read the instructions that the BBWA voters are told to base their choices on. Quote, upon the player's record, playing ability, integrity, sportsmanship, and contribution to the team in which they played. The integrity of the game.
That's not this ballot. It's different than the ballot that he's about to be
when
on,
you're talking
which is
about
a different criteria for the Hall of Fame.
To me,
I just want to be clear, because that would have been the criteria had he been voted on by the BBWAA in order to get into the Hall of Fame from that. Like the typical Hall of Fame ballot that we think of, that Albert's going to be on very soon and Yachty's going to be on very soon, those guys will be inducted with that criteria. This criteria is slightly different.
And I think that criteria should carry over for all of these. To me, Pete Rose should not be in the Hall of Fame. I think it is ridiculous that this is even a conversation of potentially putting this guy in. The fact that he has the gambling, I think he's out. I think you should be suspended. I think this for any player that would get caught today, because this is going to be a conversation throughout the rest of the time with baseball for how sports gambling has kind of taken over and what partnerships that these professional sports leagues have. You get caught gambling on your sport, you are suspended indefinitely for life and beyond and are not allowed into the Pro Baseball Hall of Fame. That is my 2 cents on this. I'm very disappointed in Rob Manfred for lifting this suspension.
Yeah. I think it's going to be looked back on, and we'll say it's crazy that it took us as long as it did to be able to get him into the Hall of Fame. And I get why they did it. Baseball didn't want him parading around profiteering off of this, because he was doing a lot of that, right? Like he was the hits king, and he would sign autographs, and he would get all of the money for it based on him being the hits king. You know what he would have done had he made it into the into the Baseball Hall of Fame? He would have been going around saying Hall of Fame, right? Like he would have been profiting off of that as well. And baseball just didn't want that. So I get it to a degree, I suppose, as to why they went about it this way. But I think it should have happened a long time ago. I am personally also a firm, staunch believer that Barry Bonds should have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think Mark McGwire is a Hall of Famer. I think all of those guys from the steroid era should be put into the Hall of Fame. And you could even put a wing in the Hall of Fame from the late 90s to the early 2000s and say, hey, in this era, we don't know who of these guys it was part of this steroid era, quote unquote, who participated in that. Like, we just don't know. There are probably players that participated, and we have no clue that they were taking performance-enhancing drugs at the time. Now, we've got a pretty good idea on some of them, right? But with those players, they're in this wing. Just know that's the backdrop to what took place in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? There were other eras where other stuff was going on, whether that be the Greenies or an era where there were literally not allowed to be people of color in the league. That changes things, right? Like, if you're playing in the 30s, if you're playing in the 50s, and you don't go up against people of color, well, there was an entire group of individuals that was ineligible to play for the sport and play in Major League Baseball that might have changed what your numbers look like. Like that is a part of the history as well. So I think when you go through the Hall of Fame and you look at the plaques and you see who's a part of that history, I think part of it is understanding and learning about what led to them being in that place. And part of Pete Rose's story is not particularly great. It is colorful and it is scandal-filled, and he is a guy that had the history of betting on baseball. So that's part of it. And part of it is, nobody in the history of the game has more hits than Pete Rose. And that makes you a Hall of Fame player in my eyes.
Because all of it has to be absorbed, right? Warts and all. It's impossible, guys, for us to actually draw that line to delineate for so many of these individuals. Okay, Barry Bonds, in all likelihood, before we saw the transformation that was readily apparent physically, this guy was bound for a Hall of Fame career. Alex Rodriguez, you could say the same thing. So because we cannot demonstrate, we cannot prove whatsoever the extent to which guys were involved. If you even want to go into some of the cheating scandals, if you even want to try to process, okay, the degree or extent to which some of these Astros were actively cheating, you can't possibly do that. So at least mark it down, so to speak, and relegate them if need be to a certain wing. But I think they have to be included for that reason.
I do think, T-Bone, like, one of the things that is interesting to me about the timing of all of this is the fact that, like, now gambling is very readily available, right? Like, if you are a player today and you saw, hey, Pete Rose was banned from baseball for gambling on the sport, and this is a guy that's one of the best players ever, and despite all of his career accomplishments, that dude is dead to baseball. And now he's literally passed, and that's why this took place. But he's been dead to baseball for, 30 years now? Mm-hmm. And he was just not even allowed around the game, much less into the Hall of Fame. If you see that, well, there is a clear disincentivized campaign to being a part of that, to having any involvement with gambling. If you then were to allow him to get into baseball's Hall of Fame, which is clearly what is the road has been open for that, does that take away some of, like, you got the carrot and the stick? This would be the stick of, like, don't you dare bet on baseball, because if you do, you will be banned for life, and there will be, like, huge consequences for you regardless of what your standing is in the game, including if you are literally the hits leader in the history of the game. If you take this away, and now, hey, despite all of that, he was then rewarded by getting into the Hall of Fame, I do wonder what that does. I don't know that people that would be potentially, like, incentivized to gamble, I don't know that, like, the consequences are something they really think about. But if they do, I do wonder what that means for them. That would be my one, like, potential breaking point with this. But I still, like, my firm stance is he should be in the Hall of Fame. Should have been a long time ago.
And I think that is a fair thing to bring up of, like, okay, well, does this kind of open up a potential path to the Hall of Fame for if somebody big of statue that did? Because that's what also makes this weird is most of the guys that would get caught on this. Like, there was a player that got caught gambling last year. I can't remember the name because he was like a guy that was a fringe major leaguer, right? This was a guy that was on a Hall of Fame trajectory until he got caught gambling on games that he took part of. I also think that kind of applies to the steroid guys as well for me, and I'm maybe you disagree with this, but sure, there's an 80-game suspension for if you get caught on steroids, but if there's still the path to the Hall of Fame and I can get a slight edge to bump my numbers as I get older, okay, well, why not then, right? If there is
that incentive is already there by performance, like based on the pay that you get as well.
Sure, but also the Hall of Fame, if they start to allow a bunch of those guys in, like it's both to me. And this is where I just, for me, I view these guys as they can't be in the Hall of Fame. And I understand everything that you're saying of, hey, there probably are guys that have cheated that are in Major League Baseball. And I agree of, look, there is that dark side of the story, the bad part of baseball where they kept a lot of players of color out of the league.
All of them.
All of them out of the league. What I want is I want to control what I see now on who goes into the Hall of Fame. And I think the Hall of Fame should be a high standard of not just great statistical stats, but guys that also did the game the right way, did not put the integrity of the sport in question, and did not cheat in the sport. And that's where I stand on this. And I will never change it. I have not wavered on that since I've done this show.
I do respect this about you, T-Bone. You are a small hall guy in general.
Yeah.
Like, you have a really high bar to clear. It's not just like the scandal stuff. It's also, if you were not clearly and obviously a Hall of Famer, you're not a Hall of Famer in your mind. I am very much more of a, hey, let's tell the story of baseball. And, like, if you were a really good player for your time, like, go ahead. Yeah, you're a part of this thing. I'm more of, like, basketball's Hall of Fame is kind of a joke because it's everything is included, right? If you were a great college basketball player, you're in. If you were great internationally, you're in. If you were a pretty good NBA player like Chris Bosh, Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. When Chris Bosh went to the Miami Heat, I was like, cool, he just signed up for the Hall of Fame in the NBA. That's what happened there. So that's probably more in my personal lane of how I view the Hall. Everybody views it differently. Everybody's going to have a different criteria on this. This will continue to be a conversation over the next 2 years or so. It will really come to a head in about 2.5 years. And if we're still employed and we still have a job, we'll certainly be talking about it at that point in time. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, which Cardinal can you reasonably expect more from the rest of the way? We'll talk about that coming up here in just a little bit. But next, do the Jets' struggles against Dallas change at all your perspective about the Blues' first-round series against Winnipeg? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is powered by Kaufman Townsley St. Louis's injury lawyers. Call 314-500-5000.
St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Alongside T-Bone and Bradford, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Do the Jets' struggles against Dallas change at all your perspective about the Blues' first round against Winnipeg? T-Bone, as I've been watching this series a little bit, it seems pretty clear to me, and you can correct me if you disagree, Dallas is just the better team. Like, there is a pretty decent gap between what Dallas is, what they have become, what they have with all of their guys available to them now that they are actually healthy, and where Winnipeg is at. And that wasn't the case during the regular season where Winnipeg was the better team. They earned the President's Trophy. They were an excellent regular season team this year. But there's still a gap between them and Dallas. When I watched that series between the Blues and Winnipeg, I didn't feel like there was much of a gap. I thought they were pretty similar. And so the reason I'm bringing this up today, T-Bone, is I always like finding out, okay, if you lose, what is the team that you lost to, what do they end up doing? And what does that say about where you're at compared to where you thought you were? Has it changed at all your perspective on the Blues and the good feelings that most of us had, honestly, big picture-wise, about the Blues coming out of that series?
I think it has a little bit, and the reason I say that is because watching this, I agree with you. It's clear the Stars are just a better team than the Winnipeg Jets, and I don't know what to make of the Jets because you don't win the President's Trophy by accident. You have a really good regular season, but they look like the famous quote on, I remember who it was in baseball, but Ken Rose, the Blue Jays. They feel like a paper tiger every time they get into the postseason. And though the Blues played very well with the Winnipeg Jets, I can't help but look at how outmatched they looked against the Dallas Stars and go, okay, maybe they had the best record and the most points. They're clearly not the best team, and it makes me think that the Blues went up against a lesser opponent than I expected going into that series. I do think the Blues would have fared still fairly well against the Dallas Stars. Like, I think they would have probably lost that series in 6. But it does make me look at this and say, boy, the Jets are just not the team that I thought they were. I thought they were a potentially Stanley Cup contender, and I think this series has shown they are not that. They are far from that.
Blue Pucks from the text line says this doesn't change my opinion at all on the Blues because I believe that the Jets are currently playing the way that they are is because of how hard the Blues played them. I think that's an interesting perspective on it that I hadn't really considered. The Blues were unbelievably physical against the Winnipeg Jets, and you saw that pay dividends over the course of the series. Could also be the fact that, hey, Winnipeg's banged up, man. They came into this series and they were not a fully healthy version of themselves. That's very much in play. I do think, like, if Winnipeg had gone on, and Ryan mentioned this over on YouTube, so if you lost to the Stanley Cup winner, is that better? Yeah, I think so. It would make me personally feel better. You can feel however you want to about it. But for me, if my team loses in the first round to the eventual Stanley Cup champion, and we did so in a 7-game series where we pushed them to the brink in Game 7, going to double overtime, and we should have beat them. 2 seconds remaining, we had them. And then ultimately they found a way to sneak past us. I'd feel pretty damn good about where I'm at as a team. That tells me, hey, we stacked up pretty damn well against the best team available. And if they end up losing in the next round, and they lose in like 5 games potentially, as it appears they might, yeah, I do think the other side of that coin can also be true where, okay, we were pretty close to a team that is still not quite there. We've got a little ways to go before we are at the level of the Dallas Stars or the Florida Panthers or maybe even the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, that's really what we aspire to be, is that championship contender. And so with that in the back of my mind, that is why I think the Blues do still need to improve, like sooner rather than later. That's why this offseason, I would be looking to upgrade in a meaningful way, especially down the middle when it comes to your forward group. And T-Bone, one of the guys yesterday that was the headliner, I mean the guy that was the headliner, was Mikael Granlund, who scored 3 goals, scored the hat trick in the game for the Dallas Stars. Granlund is a really good player. He's somebody that we talked about a lot at the deadline this year as a potential trade chip for the St. Louis Blues if they decided to buy. He's a free agent at the end of this season. Right now he's playing on the wing. He's playing like top 6 minutes for Dallas on the wing for them. But most of his history is as a center. We've talked over the last week or so, okay, the prize option is Sam Bennett, right? the center for the Florida Panthers. He's big, he's strong, he's physical. He does all of the things that you love. Doesn't quite produce at the points level that you'd expect, but he's a good player. He's going to get like a 7-year, $7 million per year contract. Option B for the Blues, if they really want to upgrade down the middle center-wise, would be looking to like a John Tavares or Brock Nelson, these 33, 34-year-old players, shorter-term deals, probably similar in terms of the money. It's like 3 years, $7 million per for those guys. But you might not be able to get them either. Maybe they just stay with their respective teams, or Brock Nelson ends up going back home to Minnesota. Okay. Now what do? Well, you go to the trade route. You'd like to see them go that direction. There's not always players available. So then there is this other bucket of the bargain bin options. I kind of like Granlund in that regard. He's 33 years old, so he's getting up there in age. Daily Faceoff is projecting he's going to get a 2-year deal worth about $5 million per, so you're not breaking the bank for him. Trent Frederick could be another guy that you kind of throw into this regard. He has played center for most of his career, is showing right now he's capable of playing on the wing, though. So if Dvorsky does end up coming up and is immediately ready for you sooner than expected, well, Granlund can just bump back over to the wing. He's been a consistent 15-goal scorer, 55 to 60-point producer. Is this something that you would be okay with if they decided to go in a different direction than Bennett or Tavares or Nelson? They end up going, all right, we're going to go to the free agent route, but it's going to be a mid-tier type of a starting at center.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing someone like a Granlund, like you're talking about, where it is kind of, okay, let's go in the bargain bin. Because as much as Granlund could potentially be, whether it be the second line center or maybe he's brought in and he is the third line and Shen still is the number 2 center, I think you have to upgrade no matter what this season at either number 2 center or number 3 center. And the reason I bring that up is preferably you'd like to get somebody that probably is on that second line, is centering that second line, and then you can either bump Shen to the wing or have him play that third line center spot with Neighbors and Bolduc. But at a minimum, you have to upgrade over Oscar Sundqvist on that third line center. I mean, JR said it with us yesterday when he was in studio of, hey, you can't have Oscar Sundqvist, a guy that's not really a goal scorer, and it's clearly at the part of his career where he can't be playing in your top 9. You've got to make that kind of an upgrade. So, yeah, I'm okay with the idea of, sure, yes, your number 1 goal is going to be, okay, let's try and improve that second line center spot. But if you can't get there and you can find maybe a bargain bin option like a Granlund, who I thought made a ton of sense for them at the trade deadline, I think that is the kind of move you have to explore if you're Doug Armstrong. And to your point, he can play on the wing. So it does work out if Dvorsky does surprise you. I think you have to operate, and I think we're on the same page of this. To me, you have to operate under the assumption of Dvorsky's not going to be playing center for you probably at all next year. And then when he is ready, it comes more as a surprise of like, okay, this is a nice benefit for us to have, rather than being caught off guard and going, oh boy, he's not really ready and we didn't really find ourselves an answer.
I'm glad you put it that way. I would plan that way. And if he changes things, great. If he forces his way into your lineup, then you can adjust. Like, there are ways that you can do that. But I think based on what we heard from Doug Armstrong at the end of the season in his press conference, I think that's the way that the Blues are operating, is they're not expecting Dalibor Dvorsky to be on the opening day, opening night roster. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But in that scenario, you're going to need somebody in your middle 6 among the forward group. And I think the ideal scenario is you go out and make that big splash, whether that be via trade or one of the big 3 centers in free agency. That's ideal. But we also have to acknowledge there is a scenario where Tavares goes back to Toronto. It seems like the likely scenario here is Nelson goes to Minnesota. And I think Sam Bennett, if I'm the Panthers, like, I'm just trying to keep him. That's the guy that I am making a priority this offseason. So, boom, there's your big 3. They're off the board. We don't know if anybody's going to become available via trade. If they do, we'll talk about it as it goes along here. But in that scenario where the well is dried up, okay, where do we go now? Trent Frederick's an option. Granlund is an option. There are other guys that you can then look at. And I think in that scenario, Granlund makes a lot of sense because it is shorter term. You have fewer years. There are obvious drawbacks here. It's why he's a 2-year, $5 million player instead of being more expensive. He's smaller. He is not as good defensively as some of these other guys. He is not as much of a sharp shooter, a guy that goes to the front of the net. That's not who he is. He's more of a guy that kind of floats around at times. There will be frustrations that come along with Granlund, and he may not be a 20-goal scorer for you. He may be more of that 15 goals, 50 points as a third-line center, and it probably keeps Braden Shen as your second-line center. That may be too much for him. to be a legitimate contender next year. But I think he makes some sense given what the alternatives would be in this scenario where the big three are off the market. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll dive into the junk drawer. But next, which Cardinals can you reasonably expect more from going the rest of the way? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Take the fast lane home weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. with Anthony Stalter, Jamie Rivers, and Carrie Davis on 101 ESPN. Two former pros and one average Joe. The fast lane is driven by Scrap Mart Metals Recycling. playoffs are on ESPN. Tonight, Celtics and Knicks. Pregame at 5:30, tip-off at 6. Your home for the NBA is 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Twin Bill taking place in Philly. I'm Bradford Bruns with a Sports Center update powered by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Right now, the Cardinals and Phils are squaring off at hazy Citizens Bank Park. Yesterday's affair postponed because of rain. So as we stand, third inning scoreless matchup. Jesus Luzardo facing Mason Wynn. Eric Fetty 2Ks. Thus far later, Sonny Gray goes up against Aaron Nola. Also tonight, post Fast Lane, 101 ESPN has hard court action. Boston, minus Jason Tatum, will try to avoid elimination versus New York. That same fate could befall Vegas. NHL. Why should Edmonton come out on top this evening? Your Sports Center update is presented by Saliga Heating and Cooling, a Daikin heating and air conditioning dealer.
It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
T-Bone asked me this question yesterday, and I didn't have a good answer at the time. So I want to discuss it here on the air. 314-399-9646 is the Air Cover Service text line. Who is the Cardinals player or players that you think has more to give the rest of the way? Because you look at it, like, Cardinals have been a really solid team thus far. They're 4 games above 500. But if they're going to be a playoff team, they're going to need even more from their roster than what they've had so far this season. T-Bone, I only came up with one guy that I think is reasonable to say, like, he can definitely give you more than what we have seen so far this season. So I'm curious where you're going to go from this. When you thought about that question for yourself, what was your answer?
So the one that I came up with, and I don't even know how reasonable it is to expect a little bit more from him, is Nolan Arenado. A little bit more of that cleanup presence of just a little bit more power.
Do you think that's still in there?
That's the thing is I don't think so, but if you're going to hit him in the cleanup spot, you almost need him to provide you a little bit more. So he's the guy that I circle as can he provide a little bit more to you? I still think there's a little bit more in the tank from Nolan Arenado, just a little bit more power. I mean, we've seen he's been able to turn on a couple of high heaters this year, which he wasn't able to last year. So my hope is that is still in there a little bit for him. I'm not necessarily saying he's the 30-homer, 100 RBI guy, but is he like a 25 and 80 guy? Maybe. I just don't. That's the thing is I don't know if that's reasonable for him, but he's the one that I would circle. I'm curious who yours is.
Yeah, I think there's only one player that fits this criteria. Now, technically, if you just look at the full season numbers, Wilson Contreras could be one of the guys that you look at, right?
And the reason I didn't throw him out there, he's starting to turn around. He's on a 25-game on-base streak.
In his last 30 games, he has an OPS over 1,000. So, like, it's hard for me to say that guy has more to give than what we have seen for a month and a half now. That's dating back to April 12th. So it's been more than a month of him being one of the best hitters on the planet. To me, the only guy that I can really say has more to give, and I don't know how much time he's going to play, is Alec Burleson.
Bingo.
Alec Burleson last year, you look at what he did in the first half of the season, the guy was awesome. He hit 290, slugged 495, and this was not some small sample size. This is over 340 plate appearances. In those 90 games, Alec Burleson had 14 doubles and 17 home runs. That is a pace of 30 home runs and about 90 RBIs over the course of the season. The guy you just mentioned with Nolan Arenado, can he be like a 25 and 80 type of guy? That was Burleson 1 year ago. We saw it. It wasn't fake. It was real. And then suddenly in the second half of the season, he stunk. Like, the power evaporated. He had 4 home runs in the final 65 games of the season. The average was not as high as it was in the start of the year. And he's not a guy that walks a ton because of his aggressive approach. So he didn't have a high on-base percentage. So in the second half of the year, he was 25% below league average. In the first half of the year, he was 30% above league average offensively. So to me, and we've seen him get hot. We've seen him go through cold spurts. The guy that has the most left to give for the Cardinals the rest of the way that we haven't seen thus far is Alec Burleson, because I can point to how it happened, what it looked like. Just see that again.
I agree, and the reason that I didn't go with him was what you kind of put as the caveat to the beginning of that of I just don't know how much he's going to play. So how much more should I expect out of him? Now, I think
if it's not him, sorry, T-Bone, it has to be Walker. Like, it's that spot in your lineup. It's one of those two players that has to be this for you.
Yeah, I agree. If it's not him, it probably is Walker. And again, the reason I just didn't throw him out there is I I don't know how realistic it is of how much we're really asking him to improve, right? Like, he is currently 41 as his OPS plus. Like, how much, if he got up to, like, where he was last year, does that really help the team? Probably not all that much. Like, you got to be talking almost what he was in his rookie year before you really have a conversation of it significantly helping out the ball club. And that's the reason I didn't throw him out there. But Burley, and I think it'll be very telling. I don't know if it's fair to say tonight, because it's the second game of a doubleheader, but what does this lineup look like against a right-handed pitcher, right? We've seen against lefties, they like to go with Herrera as the DH. So is Burley going to be the guy that gets that spot when a right-handed pitcher is going? And will they put Herrera back behind the plate? Because that's kind of the pivot there as well, because if you're going to stick with Herrera as the everyday DH, then there is no spot for Burley. And then it goes to what I was saying, why I didn't take him, because I think you're right. He probably is a guy you would expect more out of, at least from his power perspective. Well, if he's not playing, then it's unfair for me to really ask for him to give you a whole lot more.
And that really brings up the question for me to you guys as well. At what point does the lack of production, provided that the at-bats, the plate appearances are actually there with some degree of regularity, you take into consideration what the second half of last season looked like? We know that he got off to an absolutely rampant start. But at what point do you start to get concerned that maybe what we saw in the first couple of months of 2024 was more of the outlier, or I'm not saying mirage, but an outlier compared to who he is moving forward?
You're talking about Burleson?
Yes. Is it fair to consider, and at what point?
Sure. I think Burleson is always going to be an up and down player because of the nature of who he is. You know who he reminds me of a little bit is Eddie Rosario in that regard. Eddie Rosario was a guy that was super aggressive, and there would be full seasons where it was like, man, he never really got back on track. And there would be other seasons where he was a driving force to the Atlanta Braves getting to and winning the World Series. I think there is some of that in Alec Burleson's profile. Now, I like the fact that he's a left-handed hitter, and that means that 70% of the time he's got the platoon advantage. That's a huge thing for him. But he's super aggressive, and when you are as aggressive as he is, that means you sometimes get yourself out of whack, and you swing at pitches that you shouldn't be. And you can't do any damage against those pitches, so you end up getting yourself out more often than not. So that's where I stand on Burleson. I don't think he's like a bad hitter now suddenly. I think he's going to get things back on track. The tough part is with a player like him, it's almost the opposite of Gorman, but also the same results in a weird way. Like Gorman swings and misses too much, which means you have to go through the slumps to reach the power. Burleson swings at everything but never misses anything. So you have to live with the fact that he's going to put hundreds of balls in play, and many of them are just, they do nothing. They serve as effectively a strikeout, the same way it would be for Gorman. So you have to live with the slump from the batted ball luck to get to the good with him. And I don't know if this is a team, given how deep they are offensively right now, that is willing or able to do that with Burleson.
And living against or with the slumps against right-handed pitching exclusively, because do you guys want to take a guess, hazard a guess as to how many plate appearances he has this season against
like
lefties
7
exclusively?
or 8. He's
10.
barely
Big deal. That's the thing. So the long-term ramifications could well be there, because are you talking about somebody who seems to be gearing up for strictly a strong side, not even a strong side platoon role moving forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's probably going to be, I mean, he hasn't hit lefties really for his entire career. And that's not just at the big leagues. He had some struggles in the minors as well with that. So
sure,
that's probably is. And I don't even think that's a bad thing. I know a lot of people view that as a bad thing. There's guys that make a living off of it. Eddie Rosario, who you brought up, made a living off of hitting right-handed pitching. Jock Peterson has made a living. He's not doing it well this year, but he's made a living as being a platoon guy. The reason that I would agree with you of, I think Burley's got a good bat that will play at the big leagues, and I'm not overly worried of his second half struggles. I still believe that was just a guy in his first full year at the big leagues just wore down and got tired. Is the fact that he's still hitting for average. And I know that's not the end-all, be-all, but 269 was the average last year. Even this year, as much as we're talking about as if this guy is struggling, he's still hitting 261.
It's just the lack of power.
Exactly. And that's to your point of, like, you got to live with, he's going to put a ton of balls in play. And right now, he just hasn't put a ton of balls in play in which he's barreled. And that is the big difference. At some point, that's going to come. The problem is if you do go with the Herrera as your DH route of this again, well, this guy's got to play if you're going to end up getting back to seeing the power that he showed you last year. And right now, I don't know where his path to playing time is.
You got to figure out how to hit fastballs. It's the simplest thing in baseball. Like, if you're going to be a good hitter, hit fastballs. Last year, he was not good against them, and this year, he's been really bad against them again. If he doesn't figure out how to hit fastballs and put them in play and do damage against them, that's going to be a problem for Alec Burleson long term. That to me, if I'm going to be pessimistic, that would be the thing that leads me to that spot. All right, with Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. A little bit of news to pass along. This comes from the NFL. Derrick Henry and the Baltimore Ravens have agreed today on a 2-year, $30 million extension. $25 million is fully guaranteed over the next couple of seasons. It is the largest deal in NFL history for a running back over 30 years old. 2-year deal, $30 million makes all the sense in the world. I can't imagine there was either side that was like, yeah, no, this doesn't make sense for us. He was amazing for them last year. Yes, it is paying a running back over the age of 30. That's typically bad business. Derrick Henry ain't just some random running back over the age of 30. I would have paid him as well. Smart move by both sides, in my opinion.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, he was a beast last year and showed no signs of slowing down. There would have been serious question, coming off that age 29 season where he rushed for 1,100 yards for Tennessee. Guys, he rushed for 1,900 yards last year. He was almost
unbelievable.
He was almost a 2,000-yard rusher last year at the age of 30. Yeah, okay, I'm willing to pay that guy, and it's a short-term deal. It's not like it's a long-term extension. It's only 2 years. I love that extension for the Baltimore Ravens. Pay the guy that helped you unlock your offense last year.
And that was without being featured whatsoever in the opener against the Kansas City Chiefs.
By the way, another bit of contract news. We didn't get into this yesterday, T-Bone, but Trey Hendrickson was at Bengals OTAs yesterday and held a 25-minute press session afterward. Trey Hendrickson, for those that aren't familiar, is a defensive end for the Bengals. He's a great defensive end, one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, a pure pass rusher, consistently 15-plus sacks per season, and also consistently mad about his contract. Just every year is upset about the current state of his contract ever since he signed that deal with the Bengals. He is underpaid. He's making $16 million this year as one of the best edge rushers in the league. The guy makes like $15 million a year. It is not enough. But he's 31 years old. He is under contract for this season, again, at $16 million. And they have the franchise tag available to franchise tag him next year if they want. If I'm the Bengals, dude, I'm holding firm. Sorry, man. Last year, T. Higgins got to play on the franchise tag. This year, he gets to play for $16 million. And if you don't like it, you can go ahead and sit out. Next year, we're franchise tagging you. Deal with it, bro. Like, they basically have him on a 2-year, $50 million deal right now. And there is nothing that Trey Hendrickson can do unless he just wants to stop playing football in his early 30s. It sounds incredibly cold, and it is. But this is a business, and you don't just randomly get to decide that you get a new contract. T. Higgins had to go out there and play for it. He ended up earning it. Trey Hendrickson is a very good football player, but this is the contract that you signed, and now you have to play for it, man. So I just wanted to pass that along. That was the other big news contract-wise in the NFL yesterday.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if you're the Bengals, you hold firm on Trey Hendrickson. Look, man, you're the one who signed that contract. It is a team-friendly deal. If you want to sit out, then sit out. But you know what you're not getting when you sit out? You're not getting that beautiful paycheck that shows up.
$1 million a game.
Yeah, and him holding that 22-minute press conference or whatever it was, he talked and talked and talked, and then he was asked, like, well, would you sit out games? Well, I don't know about that. Okay,
well, he said, I'm not playing under my current contract.
Sure. But
which is easy to say in May.
He will cave on that stance. There's not many guys that sit out a lot of games. The only guys I can think of, Le'Veon Bell sat out a season. That did not really benefit him in the long run. And then Chris Jones sat out, the one game, and then he got paid and returned with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's not going to sit out games. This is all talk right now. We're doing the classic song and dance that happens early on in the NFL offseason before these guys get ready to take the field. He will be suited up for the Cincinnati Bengals for whoever the hell their week one opponent is.
636 said, guys, they told him they would renegotiate, and he signed a friendly deal on that. J.J. Watt agreed. Sure. Of course they did. Did he get it in writing? Like, is that put somewhere in the contract that if they don't renegotiate the deal, he gets to go sign elsewhere prior to the start of the season? Because if not, okay, and it's business. Like, teams do this all the time where they say one thing and then do another. It's cold. It's calculated. It is whatever the best thing is. Dude, I bet you they didn't think T. Higgins was going to be on the roster this year. So there's a pool of money that previously existed that doesn't exist anymore for the Bengals. They also probably thought they were going to be better than that last year. The defense was the worst in the NFL. They couldn't stop a nosebleed, and Trey Hendrickson was part of that. I don't think he was the reason they were bad, but he was a part of that defense, and they just had to go out and get a new defensive coordinator. So if I'm them, I'm also not giving a 30-plus-year-old defensive end a contract extension when I don't want to, and I don't have to, because I still have him under contract for $16 million this year, and I have the franchise tag next year. I'm sorry, but that's the way that I would go about it as well if I was the Cincinnati Bengals. It's cold, it sucks, but that's business. Coming up in 15 minutes, the Cardinals' minor league injuries speak to the importance of the Cardinals developing one of their young starters at the major league level this year. We'll get into that in 15 minutes. The Junk Drawer is next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is proud to support the 12th annual Songs for Soldiers benefit concert. Friday. WXOS HD1 East St. Louis 101 ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Let's dive into the Junk Drawer. I'm so glad Bradford is in for today's Junk Drawer story, T-Bone. Bradford, you do some teaching, right?
That is correct.
You have an education side of you.
No doubt.
Substitute teaching, all of that stuff. Okay. So I have been fascinated by how AI is creating problems. I saw the eye roll. Creating problems for teachers. Because a lot of students, T-Bone, there's stories written about this ad nauseum over the course of the last year or so and becoming more and more popular by the day. There are a lot of teachers that are finding their students are just putting the prompts into a chat GPT or any kind of an AI generator, and it will write out a piece for the student or do their homework, whatever, right? And then you get these things, and you can clearly tell a lot of the time as a teacher, oh, this was written by a bot. Like, this is not the kid's writing. This is not the way that he talks. This is not his speaking voice. And so an NYU professor, this is the latest story that I saw on this, told this writer he had AI-proofed his assignments, quote, only to have students complain that the work was too hard. When he told them that those were the standard assignments, just worded so that current AI would fail to answer them, they said that the teacher was, quote, interfering with their learning style, end quote. A student asked for an extension on the grounds that ChatGPT was down the day that the assignment was due. Another said about the work on a problem set, quote, you're asking me to get from point A to point B. Why wouldn't I use a car to get there, end quote. Speaking of AI as assistants. And another student, when asked about their largely AI-written work, told the teacher, quote, everybody is doing it, end quote. That is all from one 15-minute conversation with a single professor when discussing how students are trying to, I guess you could say, cheat the system. Others would say use AI to help them throughout their educational career, whatever you want to discuss it. I find all of this to be super interesting because what we are now going to find 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now is a lot of kids that are coming through universities or through schools are not actually learning any of the stuff that like we had to learn to get through, right? To be able to pass the courses. And instead, they're skating by artificial intelligence writing out their work for them. Bradford, I'm curious, and T-Bone, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, but as somebody that has the teaching side of things, what has been your experience with this, if anything?
It has been maddening, quite frankly. This could be a huge platform. It could be a huge soapbox. Not going to turn it into that, but I love that you essentially mentioned, BK, in this instance, the one you referenced, the preferred learning style would essentially to be handed everything. Not literally, but you understand what I'm saying there. Sooner or later, though, here's the point. The rub is that the luck or the strategy, the technique, it is going to run out because inevitably, if you're talking about the higher level of public school, if you're moving into the university level, if you're migrating to that point, and we are having this very conversation actually at home on a pretty routine basis now, you are going to be exposed because there is going to arrive that point in time when you're in the lecture hall, you are actually supposed to be displaying proof of knowledge, connecting more than the dots of getting from point A to point B, actually developing a real premise to your arguments, to your papers. And sooner or later, it's just a matter of time. It's inevitable before you are figured out. So you'd better go all in with the actual learning at some juncture because it's going to hit you and it's going to slap you upside of the face when you actually move to that next level, which you must do.
The thing is, there's no guarantee of that.
Yeah.
Like, there's no guarantee that a person couldn't skate by with this. Somebody in the YouTube chat, Gator, said he works at a university and AI is not allowed. I would just be curious, how do you
confirm that?
How do you make sure that people aren't able to use it? Yeah, how do you regulate that? Like this teacher, this professor that is a part of this study that was written about said that he was able to AI proof his questions. Like the way that they were written, the way that they were worded, it wouldn't work. Like it would jam up the system and the chat GPT or whatever just would not answer the question as it was framed. So that's certainly part of it. The guy in the chat, Gator, mentioned that when papers are almost identical, you can see that they were clearly used by AI. And that is certainly true.
Yeah.
There are a lot of the times, though, where it will be slightly different. Like you'll have a different prompt that adds to a different question, whatever it might be. And so there are some people that can they can skate through. They can skate by. And so I will be fascinated to see, is the person that actually ends up getting scammed by this, like employers down the road, right? Are we going to get to a place where 10 years from now, It's the employers that hire somebody based upon their educational experience and based upon all of their qualifications, and then they get into the workforce, and now is that's when you'll get found out. Because then you are clearly underqualified for the job, because sure, you got through your education degree, but you don't actually have any of the tangible skills that are necessary to do that job. All of this, man, is going to be really interesting over the next decade to see what it leads to.
And I think it also depends on your degree, on your area of study, right? Because if you're talking about requiring more practical, hands-on experience and work in those settings, in those collegiate settings, then at that point in time, you're able to figure out, okay, something isn't matching up here. Something isn't exactly jiving. But at the same time, isn't it incredibly ironic that we are willing to put in so much time and effort, work into trying to skate around the system as opposed to learning the tangible material?
Now that sounded like a teacher.
No, but I do find
that's something my mom would say on this, for a chat, but like using the internet to do your homework.
For real.
And I'm not even disagreeing with you, but that was definitely a teacher in Bradford right there.
I was listening to a podcast about this recently, and they were talking about how AI will widen the gap in intellectual curiosity among people, right? Like for some people, AI being available means everything that has ever been written is now available at your fingertips. And you can go through and churn through all of that and continue learning more and more and more. And that curiosity will lead you to places never before available. It means regardless of what your financial well-being is, whatever, that's all there for you as long as you have the ability to get on the internet. But for other people, it will be the opposite, where instead of having those curiosities, it will be, how do I answer this question the easiest way possible? Well, I go to ChatGPT, put it in for me, and now I don't have to answer it. I don't have to use any of my own thoughts.
Because it comes down to internal drive.
It's all there, right? So it just widens that gap more than ever before, where that person otherwise would have had to find a way to get to the answer. Now they can just go in and use ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is basically the new version of Wikipedia, where we couldn't cite Wikipedia as a formal source growing up. Now it's ChatGPT that creates a lot of these problems, but instead of sourcing it, you are actually trying to get away with utilizing it as the entire source by writing the paper for you. I find all of this to be fascinating. We could talk about it for the next 6
Can
hours.
we carry it over into your alternative podcast? I'd love to do so. Alongside of theology, let's do it.
Yeah, we've got an AI podcast, a theology podcast, a politics podcast. We've got a lot of podcasts that are coming soon.
We're too busy.
Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into a game of more likely to happen. You guys give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely. Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, joins us at 1:30. But next, the Cardinals' minor league injuries speak to the importance of Matthew Liberatore's emergence at the big league level this year. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
can now watch 101 ESPN live on our Air Alliance Team Studio Cams. Catch every show live on our YouTube channel or at 101ESPN.com. 101 ESPN Studio Cams.
Presented by the Air Alliance Team Heating and Cooling. Getting the job done quickly, correctly, 100% of the time.
This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Alongside T-Bone and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. We've continued our conversation on during the break on AI. We'll get away from that here. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, we'll get into more likely to happen. Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, joins us at 1:30. Yeah, we'll talk AI with Chris Kerber. That'll be a great conversation here on BK and Ferrario. So, T-Bone, you brought this up earlier today. You were talking about the injuries that have struck the Cardinals during their minor league season thus far. Tinkins, I believe, has yet to appear in a game. Quinn Matthews is just now working his way back from a shoulder issue that had been causing him issues early in the season. He's starting his rehab assignment, I believe, this week, if I'm not mistaken. Simra Bursa just was announced he's going to miss the rest of the season as well. So 3 of the top pitching prospects in the system right now. You've also had a guy go down for the season to Tommy John and Cooper Jerpy. He was another one that was a big-time prospect for you. It's a lot of your top arms that are going to be unavailable or have been unavailable thus far. It goes back to, the fragility of pitching in general. It's just really hard to have a bunch of pitching prospects. If you have 10, you really have 1. And also the importance of Matthew Liberatore emerging. And I'll add in Andre Palante in that regard as well. Because at this point last year, T-Bone, if I had said, hey, the Cardinals starting next season will have 2 players from their system, homegrown, that are in their rotation in mid-May of 2025. Who are they? I could have given you probably like 7 guesses before you got to either of the pitchers that I just mentioned, in Palante or Matthew Liberatore. And yet, those are the guys that have done it. And both have succeeded to different levels, but both have succeeded in their transition to the rotation. What is the importance of that in your mind? What does it do, not just for right now, but for years to come?
I think it's huge, because to that question, I have no idea what I would have said last year, because you're right. I would have needed a couple of guesses to get to Liberatore, who was a bullpen arm / a swingman, and then Palante, who had to go down to the minor leagues to reconfigure his workload arm, whatever you want to call it, to get to be a starter. Because the next best guess probably would have been McGreevy, and you hadn't even seen him yet. Maybe Graceffo at that point. But I think it's huge for what you're trying to accomplish, because you're right. Basically, when you think you have a bunch of arms in your system, and I think we have started to get to a spot where we were starting to feel really good about what was in the minor leagues from a pitching perspective of, hey, maybe Cooper Jerpy could be a guy, that weird arm angle. Quinn Matthews, you love the stuff. Tinkins, boy, this guy's been a guy we've talked about for so long. Man, these guys sometimes don't even get to the big leagues because they deal with so many injuries, and Hintz is one of those guys that's dealing with injuries. Matthews, the injuries. I think it is so important to have at least 2 guys, because now you don't have to go out and do the Steven Matz contract and the Miles Michaelis extension that they did. You don't have to be stuck with kind of veteran guys going to the bottom parts of the order or of the market and spending $15, $20 million on these guys. That is now money that you can use and allocate towards other issues that start to amass on your team. Maybe they look at it and say, I don't think they're doing this, but they say, hey, you know what? We need a right fielder going into next year. Jordan Walker's not the guy. Boom, you've now got, because you've developed 2 internal guys in your rotation, about $30 million that you don't have to spend on pitching this year that you can allocate towards maybe an outfielder, maybe to go help re-up your bullpen a little bit, add some reinforcements to it. I think it is crucial for a team to be able to develop, I would say, at least 2, maybe even 3 internal guys.
I'd say 3.
And I think it's important for the Cardinals. Now, I think this is where it becomes an interesting conversation of, do they have to develop a number 1 in their system, a number 1 or a number 2? Because I don't know if they're willing to go out and spend the money to go get the ace.
I think you can trade for that guy. I think that's one way you could go out and do it. I think you can go out and spend on it. It'll have to be an older pitcher, but you can, because you have those 3, potentially even 4 arms that have been homegrown, you've got that cost certainty as a part of your rotation. So I don't think it's necessary you develop a number 1 within your system, and it's just so incredibly hard. Think about the number of teams that have actually done that. Legit number 1s out there. Like, a lot of Cardinals fans don't even see Sonny Gray as that. Sonny Gray is probably, the 20th best pitcher in baseball? ish,
Probably.
somewhere around there. So trying to find one of the top 15 guys is nearly impossible if we're going about it that way. So I don't think it's necessary to do so. I do think you need to keep adding to this, though. It can't just be Libby and Palante. It's got to be Quinn Matthews or Michael McGreevy or TK Roby, whoever it might be. I wanted to add one other name to that mix. And T-Bone, we have this cut in the system from Dusty Blake. He was on the podcast yesterday talking to KMOX, the Gas House Gang. They had both Ollie Marmol and Dusty Blake on their show talking about things, especially on the pitching side and some of the development. We played the cut earlier today when Ollie Marmol was asked about Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker and why he still believes in them. Dusty Blake was asked about Kyle Leahy and whether or not he sees there being more in Leahy's future than just what appears right now to be a lockdown bullpen arm. Here's what he had to say about it.
I don't want to put a limit on what he can do, candidly. I know that's probably a cop-out answer too, but he's just continued to grow every year. All I know is the more he gets opportunities, the more he learns from them, the more prepared he is in those scenarios the next time out. If it means adding a pitch, if it means changing the shape of a pitch, if it means attacking a location in the zone or in chase locations more, he's not a robot, but he's found ways to improve his range in all those areas with the opportunities he's gotten. And so it just feels like a good investment anytime he's out there, that he's going to have some compound interest on that experience to be more prepared the next time.
That was Dusty Blake. T-Bone, Kyle Leahy's arsenal looks like a starter. He has 6 different pitches that he throws, and most of them are pretty good pitches. Like, they make sense, and they're really effective right now for him. He is coming out of the bullpen. There's an innings problem here potentially that you'd run into. Last season, he only threw like 70 innings between the minor leagues and the major leagues. He is also 28 years old. So this is not some young guy that you're trying to develop the way that like Matthew Liberatore is 5 years younger than Kyle Leahy. Let's put it that way. Do you think he has a chance to be a starter, though? He was not very good when he started down in the minor league level. He was also not very good for the most part when he was a reliever, though, in the minor leagues. He's just a different pitcher. He's completely changed who he is as a pitcher at this point. Do you think he could have a future as a starter at the big league level, Kyle Leahy?
I think he could. I mean, you look at the stuff. I mean, you mentioned it, and he throws like everything but the kitchen sink at you. He's got the multiple pitches that he throws, but everything when you look at those pitches, like you take a deep dive into them, the worst pitch, if you even want to call it that, is his fastball, and opponents are hitting 235 against that. Like, that's ridiculous. That's why I think, like, when we talk about guys and we hear conversations about, hey, could this bullpen arm maybe move into a starter role? Like you talked about Ryan Helsley as potentially, yes, hey, should you experiment with him being a starter? For me, the difference there is he's really only got 2 pitches. His is just the fastball, the slider, and he throws the curveball every now and then. Maybe he would utilize that more as a starter. But because I see this with Leahy where he is using these pitches and he's willing to throw them. I mean, every pitch that he's thrown this year is above 6%. I think he could, and I wouldn't. This is one of those where we haven't seen it, and because I've seen the success of Matthew Liberatore now with what they've done, if the Cardinals said to us going into spring training of 2026 and said, hey, we're going to experiment with Kyle Leahy, we're going to stretch him out, and it, by the way, quietly went under the radar. They did that this year.
Yeah.
If they said that, I'd go, okay, yeah, you know what? You guys have earned my trust. You guys were able to work with Matthew Liberatore. I'm willing to listen and see and watch what this looks like because I do think it could have success because he throws so many pitches.
I think worst case scenario, he might be the guy that has the Steven Matz role next year. Or if they go to a 6-man rotation early on in the season, he's the one that is that 6th starter. If they need multiple innings, it's Kyle Leahy that's doing that for you. And he can come in a jam. And he can get you out of that as well, as we saw the other day. So he's a super valuable Swiss Army knife. And you mentioned it, like the fastball does have some of its issues. It's not a perfect pitch, but he is a guy that I would like to see what it looks like next season if they decided to extend him out. And their history now over the past few seasons of having success, whether that be like going from reliever to starter, whether that be Matthew Liberatore, Andre Palante, they did it with both of them, or if it's getting guys back on track where we saw, hey, JoJo last season, midseason, just wasn't himself. Changeup wasn't there, didn't have a feel for it. They got him back on track by the end of the season. Or a couple of years ago, Jordan Hicks looked terrible, looked like a DFA candidate. We called for that here on the show, candidly. They figured it out. They built him back into one of the better relievers, and he became available at the market. He got them a trade chip at the deadline. So I think they've earned the benefit of the doubt at this point, and if they decide this is something they would explore, I'd really be interested to see what it looks like.
They've got the potential, and again, that's why we talk about having multiple young arms. To me, they've got the potential for 5 cost control arms that can slide into their rotation, and really 3.5 that I feel comfortable with right now. And the reason I say that is Liberatore, we've seen it. Palante, we've seen it. Probably a really good number 5. And then McGreevy, we've seen, has had success at the big league. So I feel confident that when he gets here, he's at least going to be serviceable. And then the other 2 that I would throw out there is if you decide to experiment with Leahy, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And then there's Quinn Matthews that I still feel like is a big leaguer. Like, that's 5 cost control arms. And maybe Matthews doesn't work, or maybe the Leahy experience doesn't work. Okay, well, I'm willing to go out and spend $50 million for 1 back-end starter. I'm not willing to do that for 4 guys or build a whole rotation through free agency like they did last year.
He's T-Bone. That's Bradford on BK. Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, joins us in 15 minutes. More likely to happen is next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is powered by Kaufman Townsley, St. Louis's injury lawyers. Call 314-500-5000.
St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. What's more likely to happen? They'll figure it out. BK and Ferrario's most likely to happen.
314-399-9395. 96406 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You guys give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. All right, let's start out with this, T-Bone. More likely to happen. The Cardinals finish with a 30 home run hitter this season, or they finish with at least 3 25 home run hitters.
Ooh. 30 home run hitter or 325 homer hitters.
Last year, they did not have a single 25 home run hitter. 2 years ago, they had 3 of them. Goldie, Arenado, Gorman.
Who was their leader in home runs last year?
Last year, I think it was Burleson, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
was it not Goldie still? I'm serious.
It was Goldie, 22.
Oh, okay. I thought Burley did.
Goldie at 22, Burley at 21.
I'm going to say, I'm going to say they have one 30 home run hitter. And I think it's going to be Contreras. Because I don't know if they've got 325 homer guys. Herrera's probably that. I think Contreras is that. I just don't know who the third is. Like, maybe Nootbaar? But I'm not convinced he's a 25 homer guy. And if it's not him, I don't think there's another guy on the roster.
You said Contreras. Who were your two?
Contreras and Herrera, I think, are 25. I don't know who the third would be, so that's why I will lean towards. I'll just give an extra 5 to Contreras. Yeah. I think at the beginning there, I said he'd hit like 35. So what the hell? Yeah, I'll go. Contreras.
You're basically
30.
just eliminating the first month and saying the rest of it will go as I anticipated.
You have successfully convinced me, Tanner. I came in, I was thinking, okay, I like the quantity to go along with the quality, but outside of Contreras, I'm not sure that you have a surefire guy, and that is also dependent on health with Contreras for that matter too. We know that Arenado is no longer that guy. Gorman's not going to get the regular PT to even sniff that territory. I think it's Wilson only.
Yeah, that's what I would bet on as well. I do think our Nootbaar has a real chance to hit 25 this year. I just don't know if I can bet on it, so I would go with one 30 home run hitter, and I do think it would be Contreras. T-Bone, what do you got for us?
Guys, more likely to happen. The Cardinals win the NL Central, or somebody else wins the NL West other than the Dodgers.
I think the latter. I think it is more likely that the Padres win the NL West. The Dodgers' pitching injuries are real, they are significant, and they are worthy of consideration in this conversation. Also, Padres are really good, man.
Yeah.
They're a really good baseball team. Here is a list of Dodgers pitchers currently on the injured list. Tyler Glasnow, Roki Sasaki, who just went on the injured list today, Blake Snell, Gavin Stone, River Ryan, Emmett Sheehan, Brusdar Graterol, Michael Kopech, Blake Trinan, and Evan Phillips.
Wow.
Those 10 guys that I just read off would make up one hell of a staff and throw out 3 other pitchers, whoever you want them to be, on any other team. And that's removing anything that the Dodgers currently have available to them. So I think it is more likely that the Padres win the West than the Cardinals win the Central.
Yeah, and sorry, even though Kershaw, his return is imminent, he's not your salvation at that point in his career. Now, I'm with you. I think that San Diego presents more than a prohibitive threat there, even though the Cardinals' prospects of competing and winning potentially the crown in the Central right there for the taking. But San Diego is no joke, as could have been expected, perhaps, under Mike Schilt.
I will actually lean Cardinals win the NL Central.
I wonder what Vegas says on this, by the way.
I think they're like plus 520 to win the NL Central. I don't know what the odds are for everybody else in
That's
the
what I was curious.
West. But the reason why is the Cubs have the same issue they had last year. Now, it's an issue that, in theory, is the easiest to fix at the trade deadline. But I say that, and it's a lot easier said than done, and that is their bullpen still sucks. Their bullpen is at a 4.68 ERA, which is 7th worst in baseball right now. It is an Achilles heel. It hurt them last night until they came through in the bottom of the ninth. They almost lost to the Marlins. I think the Cardinals are the better all-around team. I think it's more likely they win the NL Central.
The Cardinals are 5-1 in Vegas. The Padres are 6-1 in Vegas to win their respective divisions. So according to Vegas, Cardinals slightly more likely.
What is San Fran to win the division? Because everybody talks about them, but I'm not buying them.
San Francisco to win the NL West is 17-1. Diamondbacks are 16-1. So really, according to Vegas, it's still a 2-team race.
I like Zona much better than San Fran.
I agree.
Yeah.
Bradford?
All right, as a nod to Alex, let's actually take it to the rink. Guys, the Canucks have elevated Adam Foote from the assistant role to the head job there in Vancouver. Obviously crashed and burned a bit down the stretch this particular season, so more likely to happen next year. Vancouver qualifies for the postseason, or another team from the Central, i.e. Utah, gets in.
Oh, interesting. I will say it is more likely that I'll go Vancouver. They still do have some star power. I think the Pacific is more up in the air. So I'll go Vancouver is the team that ends up getting in, and maybe LA takes a step back. Vegas has some stuff that they've got to get figured out with some of their injury questions as well. Maybe they even get in as one of those wildcard teams. So I'll say Vancouver is more likely. I just don't know who that team is in the Central.
That's what I was just about to say. I'm not sure who that other team in the Central would be.
It's not Nashville.
It's not Nashville. I mean, it basically comes down to would it be Utah?
Not Chicago.
And until I see Utah prove it, they've been the talk of the league when they were in Phoenix. They've been the talk for like 3 years of, this could be the year. And they keep laying an egg. So I agree. I'll go with Vancouver. And I was even hesitant because I've seen the whole going with a new guy as a coach that doesn't have experience. Didn't work out here in the Lou.
Yeah, I think you still have to roll with Vancouver because there is, I don't want to say an abundance of talent on that roster, but I still believe in it more than Utah. And I know that our esteemed Blues producer, Grant Francis, he's been bullish on Utah. He was bullish on that hockey club entering this season, but I need to see that breakthrough. And when you're talking about the Central Division rung there from top to bottom, I don't know if there's that much improvement beyond the 89 points posted this season.
All right, we're going to go through these rapid fire edition today. So quick answers. We'll get to Chris Kerber on the other side. From the 314, guys, more likely to happen. Both Walker and Gorman get sent down at some point this season, or both stay with the club the entirety of the 2025 year.
I think both get sent down. If they continue to play like this, I can't see them both being up here.
I think it is more likely that both of them stay put with the big league club all season.
Both stay up.
I think both will go down.
One, maybe not the other.
From the 314, guys, more likely to happen for the Cardinals. They develop an ace or a 40 home run hitter.
Oh, I'll go ace. I don't know who the 40 home run hitter guy is. I thought it was going to be Gorman. I don't think there's any power like that in the system still.
Give me the ace as well. You may have somebody returning down on the farm in just a matter of days. We're optimistic.
I actually think 40 home run hitter. I think it's really hard to find those guys, but
40 home runs is really hard too.
That's what I'm saying. It's really hard to find that 40 home run hitter, but developing an ace is damn near impossible. And even when you do, the guy is very likely to get hurt at some point prior to getting to the big league. So I'll go with the 40 home run hitter. All right, coming up next, Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues here on BK and Ferrario.
We're just a couple of weeks away from the return of the Totem Golf Tournament with the morning after. Presented by Michelob Ultra, May 29th and 30th at Oak Valley Golf Course and Resort. Get your foursome together for a full day out on the course with TMA, including complimentary breakfast from Donut Drive-In, lunch from Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken, all the Michelob Ultra, the 100 West Dental closest to the pin competition, a long drive contest courtesy of Pondoff's Anonymous Recovery Podcast, and an after party with food from Texas Roadhouse Thursday and Super Smokers Barbecue Friday. A portion of the proceeds will go to support the St. Louis Hero Network in honor of Brian McKenna. Friday's foursomes are already sold out, and remaining spots for Thursday are filling up fast. Find all the Totem info now at 101ESPN.com. Brought to you by Michelob Ultra Superior Light Beer.
Chris Kerber with you here. All right, hey, true story. I'm sitting back in the bedroom. The air conditioner's pumping, and I'm kind of listening to it, and it sounds like it's pumping a little harder than it should. No problem. I'm not worried about it. I've got Classic Air Care ready to take care of it. So I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call them. I'm going to say, hey, here's what I'm sounding. I actually recorded the sound as well, and they're going to let me know what to do. Hey, this is something we should get checked out. Do this, do that, that kind of stuff. That's the kind of service I expect when I deal with somebody, and that's the kind of service you can expect when you go to Classic Air Care. That's why I talk about them on the air. I tell you what you're going to expect. And if you don't get that, well, we want to know about it, but you will get it. They've got a 4.8 Google rating when it comes to the reviews that they have. The service is that good. But what I'm talking about is just the kind of comfort and backup that you know, that when you've had them come out and maintain, when there's a maintenance plan, when things come up, you know you can call them and you know you're going to get a great reaction and great service. That is why They take care of me and my family here at the house, and that is what you can count on. That's what, when we talk to you about Classic Air Care, you hear Alex Ferrario talk about how long he's used them. When you hear that, you know you can rely on them. Otherwise, if it was something else, you wouldn't hear me talking about them. That's how much I believe in these guys. So it's Classic Air Care. You can book an appointment online. You can schedule your regular seasonal maintenance to make sure that the unit is running properly and you avoid catastrophic problems. And you can also make sure you get one of their maintenance plans, which gives you priority scheduling, discounts, you name it. It's Classic Air Care. They'll take care of you the way they take care of the Kerber household. And you can book those appointments online at classicaircare.com.
ESPN Sports Center.
Targeting 10 straight. Good afternoon. I'm Bradford Bruns. Your Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Game 1 of today's split doubleheader at Citizens Bank Park, motoring into inning number 6 with the Cardinals and Phillies scoreless. Philadelphia does have 2 runners on at first and second, respectively, as Fetty continuing to deal on the mound. St. Louis, of course, has reeled off 9 consecutive victories. Sonny Gray gets tonight's assignment as he battles Aaron Nola. Other matinee action, Minnesota pacing Baltimore 4-3. Former Redbird Matt Carpenter also announces his retirement following 14 big league seasons. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Cardinals in an interesting spot in the game. 2 on, 1 out, bottom of the 6th inning against the Phillies. Eric Fetty has been pretty good for the Cardinals so far. They're leaving him in 89 pitches thus far. He's facing Castellanos right now. We'll keep you updated on that as we go along here today on BK and Ferrario. But right now we are going out to the Callier and Thompson hotline. Chris Kerber is the voice of the Blues, and he joins us each and every Wednesday here on the show. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always. How you doing today?
BK, I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing really well. So we talked a little bit earlier about this Stars-Jets series that's taking place right now. Dallas up 3-1 in the series. They look like the clear-cut better team going up against Winnipeg. I asked this of T-Bone. I wanted to ask this of you as well, Curbs. Do the results of this series, if Dallas ends up winning it in 5, does that change at all how you viewed the Blues series against Winnipeg?
No, it really doesn't. I got asked today. I was on the Riz show earlier this morning and kind of asked, hey, are you one of those that believes in the if you get knocked out of the playoffs, at least it's something to say, well, you got knocked off by a team that won a Stanley Cup or something. No, I don't look at things that way. Not to me, it really doesn't. I think that maybe the St. Louis team showed the Dallas Stars how to beat the Winnipeg Jets, and a little more poise, composure, and frankly, a little more puck luck probably is the difference there. But the biggest thing in that series, guys, to me, that you're looking at is the Blues had a chance to win game number 1 of that series. You go back and they had the lead halfway through the 3rd period and couldn't hold on to it, right? Well, the Dallas Stars won game 1 of that series and they took over home ice. And for whatever reason, I mean, I'm baffled by this and fascinated by it. For whatever reason, that team in the playoffs and Hellebuck's numbers in the playoffs, not just this year, but in previous years, are just not good. It's crazy how different the home versus road is for them in the playoffs. So, no, I don't look at it so much that way. I do think that even though the Winnipeg Jets won the regular season, again, winning the regular season earns you the right for home ice and earns you the right to get to the playoffs, things like that. But once you're in the playoffs, you've got the top 8 teams in each conference playing each other, and then you've got to beat one of the top teams. And in this case, Winnipeg's trying to beat the second-place team 4 out of 7 times. It's hard to do, and I just think Dallas is a better coach team, a much more experienced coach team. Pete DeBoer's coaching record really is fantastic in the playoffs, even though he hasn't won the Stanley Cup. So I don't think it, maybe long-winded way of saying it, but it doesn't change my opinion on how things went or how things looked. I think the Blues would have been a really good, formidable opponent against the Dallas Stars. Would have loved to have seen that opportunity, but that just wasn't in the cards.
And Kerbs, one thing that we've also talked about now looking at the offseason for the Blues this week is, I think we talked to you last week about Sam Bennett, a guy that'll be a free agent center who could get like a 6-7 year deal on the open market. And my question for you is, we've talked about Sam Bennett. Which one do you think could make more sense for where the Blues are at? Is a guy like Sam Bennett who's going to get that long-term deal because he is a little bit younger, or maybe some of the guys that are going to get shorter-term deals because of their age, like a John Tavares or a Brock Nelson or even a Granlund who went for a hat trick yesterday?
So Tanner, this to me, I think that it's a great question. It just depends on philosophically which camp you fall in. I don't believe the Blues fall into the camp where, necessarily one of those massive signings completely fits. And the only reason I say that, and then, hey, listen, I'd love to be surprised and see something, could the Blues be in for a Mitch Marner, right? If we really talk pie in the sky, whatever it is, right? But philosophically, you look at where this team is, how it's been built over the last few years. You look at what Doug Armstrong has said. For them all of a sudden to make that splash and say, okay, we're going for that 29-year-old and on a 7-8 year deal. Well, it had to be a 7-year deal unless you traded for his rights ahead of time, right? A centerman like that, or a centerman now, with what Robert Thomas is doing, if you signed a 7-year deal, you're talking about potentially blocking the Dalibor Dvorsky, right? And some of the growth there. Because if you have Thomas number one and then you had a real solid guy like that number two, you're talking 3 or 4 years. Now, look, we saw Robert Thomas play wing for the better part of the first 2.5 to 3 years of his career. So I guess part of that is possible. But it doesn't seem to fit to me, the direction, the growth, the progress, and every other aspect of kind of where this team is at right now. Somebody defensively maybe fits it better for me, but you heard Doug Armstrong say he feels that the top four is pretty set. So I really do think, guys, that when you look at, honestly, if you go a full year of Jim Montgomery, even if you brought back the same exact team, okay, you're a better team because now you've got that for a full year. To me, it's a player like a Trent Frederick. It's a player that, yes, Bennett does bring that jam and all that, but that's going to cost you a lot more money. On the horizon, you have to have extensions for Broberg and Holloway ready. Remember, those are only 2-year deals, guys. This summer, they've got to find a way to extend Joe Hofer. They're going to continue down that road. So I just think in the all-around scheme of things, I think there's other players out there that actually help get you that 5 to 10% better they're talking about without having to go all the way. If there's one guy, like to me, guys, you look at a Mitch Marner, and that to me just feels like a different player altogether. If we're talking pie in the sky, but big picture, it just doesn't feel like this is one of those big free agent moments. And maybe I'm wrong, and that would be exciting too, I think, huh?
We're talking to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues here on BK and Ferrario. Kerbs, one of the guys that we've brought up in that regard, like it feels kind of more like a Tyler Bozak offseason than a Ryan O'Reilly offseason, right? They signed him to that 3-year deal, $5 million per. That was heading into the 2018 season. Now, that happened in the same offseason. They had Bozak, and then they went out and traded for Ryan O'Reilly. That $5 million against the cap in 2018, if you were to change that based on the percentage of the cap then, which was about 6%, to what that would be now in today's game, given the increase in the cap, the spike that we have seen, it'd be about $6.5 million. So that's kind of the type of player that we're talking about here. Do you think, Granlund is projected to get 5 to 6? That's kind of where some of the analytics sites that put this stuff out, they see him being. Is that more in line with what you're talking about? Frederick is another guy that could be there. Could those be the types of players that fit what the Blues are looking for?
Yeah, so to me, a couple of angles from what you're hitting on, and I think you hit on one of the real important ones there, BK. Okay, so I go back and I look at the Tyler Bozak signing, and what happened in that offseason is they had already kicked the tires at Ryan O'Reilly and explored that. But look at where the St. Louis Blues were at the time, right? Robert Thomas wasn't ready to be a number one centerman, right? And at the same time, you still had Braden Shen. And Braden Shen really was your number one centerman, okay? The acquisition of Ryan O'Reilly shifts Braden Shen back, into that number two role, right? And then you've got room for the growth of Ryan O'Reilly. Of Robert Thomas. How does that relate to Dvorsky? That's what you have to kind of figure out and debate as yourself as fans. The thing for me is I do think that the Blues would benefit by finding a number two centerman. But can you find that in a trade because you have assets now from a prospect standpoint? Can you find that in a trade because you might have some assets on your roster right now, and that's how you change your roster, right? And in the process, do you find somebody that is good for the next 2 to 3 to 4 years like a Ryan O'Reilly was, okay? Rather than signing somebody to a 7-year contract. Most of the free agents out there, you're looking at 7 years. So when it comes to, say, Granlund, or when it comes to some of the others, yes, there could be great value in them depending on the term. And the term is less to me about the dollars so much as how many years are you going to be able to ink them for. So that's kind of the thought process I think you have to have there. For me, guys, look, Braden Shen, at his price, at his role, at his experience, right? Braden Shen is your third-line center potentially next year. And has to, based on the way you look at the top six, at some point he's flanked by Neighbors or by Bolduc, or by somebody else you bring in, because there's no room for one or two of those guys in the top six the way it is right now. You are really, really deep, and you create massive mismatch problems. And then from a cap standpoint, that $6.5 million now is what like the Tyler Bozak signing 100%. Was. And one other thing to relate it to you, remember, it was if you go back and you listen to the comments and talk to Doug Armstrong about that Ryan O'Reilly trade and how it came about, they had kind of been ready to move on from the Ryan O'Reilly deal, okay? And then a couple things happened. The Berglund mess up by his agent, right, to not give a no-trade clause, or to not give the team the list, which freed the Blues up to trade Patrick Berglund. That opened a center spot that they didn't think they had room on the roster for. But then they looked at the other free agent signings that they had in there, and it was the free agent signing of Tyler Bozak. It was bringing David Perron back in the fold. They looked at that, and then they said, geez, you know what? We're a number one center. We're a top centerman away from being a really, really good hockey team. And they circled back with Buffalo on the deal and got the deal done, right? So a lot, once again, had to happen for that to come through. And I was in the room when Doug Armstrong called Ryan O'Reilly after that deal was official. They put him on speaker, and Ryan O'Reilly, who was on a boat at the time, said, Doug, let's go win a Stanley Cup. It was one of the coolest things right then and there. He said that to him literally after he signed him. I'm excited to be here. Let's go win a cup. But that's what happened there. So that's why I go back, guys, to the philosophical aspect of this. If Doug Armstrong were to look at the team and the success he had last year and say, okay, clearly the Broberg and Holloway signings really sped up where we are at. Can we become elite with one trade, with one signing, and move this even further? And it cost me a couple of prospects that it's going to be hard to figure out where you fit them in anyway. It's the one area that Doug is really good. Go back and look at the Columbus Blue Jackets real quick. And when you look at prior to them letting go of Jarmo Kekalainen and how many supposed prospects they had, sometimes the best value of a prospect, guys, is before he even gets to the big leagues or the NHL, because that's when everybody thinks the potential is there. And if you don't have room for all of them to play, you just don't. So you've got to use those assets, and that's where Doug has been really, really good.
All right, Kirst, we just got like 30 seconds here, but out of curiosity, you've mentioned his name a number of times. Ryan O'Reilly, I don't think is going to be made available this offseason, but it's possible. We'll see what direction that the Nashville Predators decide to go. Obviously, things weren't good enough this season. He's got 2 years left in his deal, $4.5 million per. He's basically the money equivalent of what Granlund is potentially going to get this offseason. Would you consider it if you're Doug?
Yeah, I'd consider it. I would consider it to see what the role is, whether it's him or some, because, again, the term of those 2 years are there. Whether they think things have passed them up, that kind of stuff, that's another thing. But that to me, is the kind of window that you consider, because I do think that there is still that hole in that second-line center spot. I think Braden Shen filled it well. But I think if you can upgrade there, you become a team to reckon with. So, yeah, that's one. I'd at least call up my teammates and on the management side said, should we look at this, guys? But again, I'm with you. I don't know that even is a possibility.
For sure. Just one of those things you explore in the offseason. If nothing else, it's interesting for conversation. Hey, Curbs, appreciate
fun to talk about.
Appreciate the time as always. We're looking forward to talking with you again next week.
Okay, guys. Have an awesome week.
Same
Cheers.
That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. Ivan Herrera's a stud. Just an absolute stud. Just hit a double down the line. The Cardinals had almost nothing going offensively against Jesus Luzardo all day long. And then he hits one down the line, just smoked. And then Jordan Walker comes up right after him. Credit where it is due, man. Puts one right up the middle, right back to where it came from, and he finds a way to. It's a hard hit single that he legs out into a double because they threw home to try to get Ivan Herrera. Ivan Herrera scores. Cardinals up 1-0 in the top of the seventh inning. T-Bone, we had said the other day, the Cardinals, there are some of these games that feel like playoff games. We had mentioned game one of this series against the Phillies as this exact situation. And there are times where in the past, Cardinals offense puts up 1, 2, 3, 4 runs in these games, and it's like, oh man, the offense just didn't do enough. It's because of the pitching. The pitching is what has changed for the Cardinals this season. Eric Fetty was really good for them today, and that allows the offense to bide its time against Jesus Luzardo, who had been dealing. And now you get into the seventh inning. He's against the ropes. He's up in the mid-90s in his pitch count. You've seen him a few times now through the order. Von Herrera does his job. Jordan Walker does his job. Now you've got a lead. Now it's on the bullpen to go keep it.
Yeah, and because you got a solid outing from Fetty, the game is now in their hand. Look, they went first and second. You had Kepler coming up, and you end up going to your lefty and Steven Matz. And I don't know if it's because the Phillies don't trust their right-handers off the bench, or if it's because Rob Thompson was remembering back to how Ali Marmol was playing chess while he was playing checkers in game one. He decided not to pinch hit. What happens? Matz gets the strikeout. Now your offense comes through. I mean, this game couldn't be set up better for them. And to your point, credit to Walker. Look, I think Luzardo missed where he wanted that changeup. He clearly wanted that low and away, which has been the pitch against lefties that Walker has been struggling. But, hey, you know what part of the big leagues is? Hitting mistakes. Yep. And that's exactly what Jordan Walker just did to come through with that RBI single.
I would also add this. Maybe part of this is Ollie Marmol knowing, hey, they're not going to go to their bench because it's a doubleheader. And they probably have guys that they just want to stay away from in game one, so that way they are fully rested, ready to go going into game two this evening. So that could be part of it as well. It's been a well-managed game by the St. Louis Cardinals. It's been a well-managed season, honestly, in my opinion, for the most part by Ollie Marmol. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll hit the rewind next year on 101 ESPN.
The NBA playoffs are on ESPN. Tonight, Celtics and Knicks. Pregame at 5:30, tip-off at 6. Your home for the NBA is 101 ESPN. to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Alongside Tanner and Bradford on BK, we're just a couple of weeks away from the return of the TMA Dotem Golf Tournament. It's refreshed by Bud Light. The Dotem returns on May 29th and the 30th. Friday's foursomes already sold out, but Thursday, May 29th, there are spots available. A portion of the proceeds will benefit the St. Louis Hero Network in honor of Brian McKenna. You can find all of the details right now at 101ESPN.com. Cardinals up 1-0 in the bottom of the seventh inning. Some interesting managerial decisions over the next couple of innings available for Ollie Marmol. We'll certainly break those down tomorrow morning when we are back here on BK and Ferrario. Bradford did a fantastic job for us producing today. Appreciate him hopping in. Alex was out, but he'll be back in with us tomorrow. So if you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It is all sponsored by
Schaefer Door Company.
That 101 ESPN app, free to use, easy to download, and it is sponsored by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane will have you taken care of from 2 to 6 right here on 101 ESPN.
Start your day with the morning after on 101 ESPN.